Inspector Lee lowered his voice, and the tension returned. Explain to me clearly, what is really happening? It's definitely not a murder this time. I just want to take a look at her information. Are you kidding? Do you think we can provide that kind of sensitive information to a citizen? If there's nothing else, I'm going to hang up. After Inspector Lee hung up, Chun-gu felt rather hopeless. Just as he was trying to figure out what to do, his phone vibrated. It was a message from Inspector Lee. The case files definitely cannot be released to the public, but you can come over at around 7 to 8 p.m., and if your case is serious enough, I can help you take a look at the files. Chun-gu understood it immediately after reading the message. There were probably too many people at the office, and he could not promise him anything with so many eyes and ears around him. Uncle Lee, do you have any records on Muyang High School? What happened to force the school to close down? And why are there so many supernatural stories surrounding it? After some time, Inspector Lee's reply came. The school was built on top of a crematorium, so the land was very cheap. However, due to the taboo, no one wanted to purchase it. Later, it was purchased by a short and rather rotund old man who had the surname Chen. He built a private orphanage on the site. A few years later, Zhejiang established societal construct related to childcare, and so the old man transported all the age-appropriate children to the government-supported orphanage. This meant that there was a bunch of older kids who were left behind at the orphanage. To solve the education problem for these kids, the old patron visited many schools, but none wanted to accept them. Running out of options, the senior purchased the textbooks and started teaching the children himself. This story was picked up by the local news and thus alerted the relevant government bodies. After some discussion, the orphanage was changed into Muyang High School, and those children adopted by the senior became the school's first batch of students. Before reading the messages, Chun-gu had not expected Muyang High School to have such a complicated history. Inspector Lee, can you find out how many students there were in the first batch? Do you have that kind of information? After 20 minutes, Inspector Lee called him directly. Xiao Chen, I'm now in the filing room. Most of files related to Muyang High School have been taken away by the city station since the murder case has been solved. Uncle Su, I just want to confirm one thing. Among the first batch of student, were there any girls by the name of Chen Yalan and Wang Xian? Let me take a look. Inspector Lee flipped through the pages before answering. When Muyang High School was first built, there were 25 students, and they were all originally from the seniors' orphanage. 25. This number was close but not exactly the same as the number of uniforms. Indeed, but Inspector Lee hesitated. There is only one survivor, the girl you mentioned, Wang Xian. The rest of them came into some kind of accident. Unfortunately, initially Chen Yalan was found hanging in the bedroom for unknown reasons, and then other than Wang Xian, who shared the same bedroom with her, the remaining 23 people went on a school trip, but the bus veered off the road and fell into the dam. All of them died, including the driver. 25 people with one survivor. Chun-gu was reminded of the 24 school uniforms, and he slowly understood why the lingering spirits of the 24 students had returned to the classroom. It had a much deeper meaning to them, it was their home. Is there anything else? If not, I have to go back to work. Inspector Lee had already done a big favor for Chun-gu. One last question, is there a way for me to contact the child who survived? Chun-gu had confirmed that this Wang Xian was the person that the pen spirit was looking for. Wang Xian was hospitalized due to the trauma of Chen Yalan's incident. Afterwards, I heard that a kind couple adopted her. You can find out more from the adoption website. Since Wang Xian's case is so unique, there should still be records of her. After hanging up, Chun-gu followed Inspector Lee's suggestion and logged onto the website. He searched for half an hour before he found Wang Xian's name. The person who had adopted her was a Madame Gu. After clicking on Madame Gu's profile, he realized that she had posted many threads on the forum requesting for help. Chen Gu just wanted to know a bit more about this Madame Gu, but as he studied her threads, his expression changed. Wang Xian seemed to have fallen victim to some kind of psychological illness, and Madame Gu had gone about asking for professional help. In the end, it was a doctor with the surname Gao who had come to her aid. This Dr. Gao's resume was printed clearly on his profile: senior psychologist, tenured lecturer at Zhejiang Medical University. Could there really be such a coincidence? Chen Gu hesitated for a moment before giving Gao Rushue's father a call. Hello. Dr. Gao, I'm Gao Rushue's friend. We discussed a boy's condition last night. Has the boy's condition stabilized? I'm not sure about that, but I'm calling because of another case today. Chen Gu thought about it and decided honesty was the best policy. Have you treated a girl by the name of Wang Xian? Dr. Gao was surprised. How do you know about that? I know the reason behind Wang Xian's psychological problem, and I can save her. Can you please give me her address? You can save her. Dr. Gao denied his demand immediately. I'm sorry, but I cannot give away my patient's information. Dr. Gao, Wang Xian is in very deep pain. As her attending physician, you have to know how much suffering she is in. She must be tormented by fear and nightmares. Can't you give me a chance, please? Dr. Gao was silent for a very long time before sighing. How about this? I will accompany you. We will meet at the gate to Fanghua residential area. Okay, see you there. This was the best result Chen Gu could get. 40 minutes later, Chen Gu finally met Gao Rushue's father in person. He was a middle-aged man with a fit physique and plenty of charm. After a simple introduction, Dr. Gao led him to one of the large buildings. Can you really solve Wang Xian's issues? Dr. Gao was most concerned about this. I know the reason to her sickness, so I have 50% confidence that I can solve it. That is more than enough. She's also a special patient. The antidepressants and medicine aren't working so well, but I simply couldn't find any other symptoms in her. The pair rode the elevator until the 14th floor. One of the doors was opened. Dr. Gao had called the patient's family before they arrived. The room was clean and thickly carpeted. The edges of the tables and counters were wrapped in thick cloth. There was a fruit plate on the coffee table, but nothing sharp like knife or fork. Dr. Gao, please come in. A woman in a white dress welcomed Dr. Gao and Chen Gu into the room. She looked to be in her 40s and took good care of her appearance. Has Wang Xian's condition improved? I've given her the recommended sleeping pills and antidepressants, but the effect has not been as positive as I hoped. The woman smiled weakly. If anything, her condition hasn't improved, but all the side effects did show themselves: dry heaving, shivering, and shaking hands. She could not even grip the chopsticks during lunch, and the food fell all over the table. Dr. Gao, do you think Wang Xian can still be cured? Believe me, she will get better. The woman then noticed Chen Gu behind the doctor. And this is? My name is Chen Gu. Chen Gu did not want to waste time. Can I please meet your daughter? The woman turned to Dr. Gao to ask for his opinion. I will join him. After Dr. Gao nodded, the woman reluctantly let Chen Gu into the room. The child is in her bedroom. After having one spoon of lunch, she started wailing. The woman walked to a door. She knocked lightly on it for quite some time, but there was no response. She placed her hand on the door knob, twisted, and opened the door a sliver. The woman sighed wordlessly before moving back. Let's go in. Dr. Gao looked at Chen Gu. Do not say anything to provoke the patient. Before you do anything, please discuss it with me. Okay, Chen Gu promised before he was let into the room. The carpet in the bedroom was even thicker, and the edges of the cupboards and table were all sanded off. There was not anything sharp in sight, even the windows were installed with anti-theft netting. There was not a bed in the room. Instead, there were two thick mattresses placed together. All of the decorations were white, and there were no personal effects. Dr. Gao moved to the side, and Chen-gu finally saw the woman he was looking for. A slender girl was lying on the mattress. The white shirt with a round collar barely covered up her frame, her skin was white to the point it looked translucent, and she appeared fragile, like too violent a movement would cause her body to snap. Realizing that she had guests, the girl slowly sat up in bed. While Chen-gu expected a raging mental patient, the girl was surprisingly normal, if a little reticent. Dr. Gao squatted down beside the mattress to maintain a level eye contact with the girl and asked kindly, "Wang Xian, does your head still hurt?" The girl shook her head and took a glance at Chen-gu before putting her head down. Then, "Have you been sleeping?" Dr. Gao asked, but this time, the reaction elicited was much more intense. She reached out to grab at her own hair, and when she released, there were strands of black hairs stuck between her fingers. That was how strong she was as she yanked her hairs out. "Still can't sleep, huh?" Standing up, the brows of the good doctor were deeply furrowed. Neither of the medicines had an effect. "Dr. Gao, may I speak to her?" "Wang Xian's current condition is considered stable, so go ahead." Chen-gu mimicked Dr. Gao and squatted down. The girl probably assumed he was also a doctor, so she did not show much resistance. She merely pulled her sleeves down to cover the red welts on her arms, which felt like they were the result of her own rabid scratching. The girl before him was frail, she gave the impression of a paper kite, like a single thread was everything that connected her to survival. A single mistake, and she would be lost among the dark clouds before being torn apart by the storm. "Wang Xin." Chen-gu pulled out the ballpoint pen from his pocket. "Your friend wants to talk to you, so I brought her with me." Wang Xian glanced at the ballpoint pen but did not show any special emotion. She probably wanted to smile at Chen Ji's attempt at a joke but found herself unable to do even that. Dr. Gao beside him and the woman who was eavesdropping at the door were confused, they did not understand what Chen-gu was up to. Chen-gu was not discouraged by Wang Xian's lack of reaction. He retrieved a piece of white paper from the desk and placed it on the mattress. He hovered the pen above it and prepared to start the pen spirit game. Chen-gu was facing away from Dr. Gao and facing Wang Xian. He moved his lips but made no sound as he mouthed the incantation to invoke the pen spirit. Pen spirit, you are my. As his lips opened and closed, Wang Xian's focus was slowly attracted to Chen-gu. She turned to look at Chen-gu fully and reading the words on Chen Ji's lips, she flailed her arms around and shrunk back into the walls like she was reminded of something horrible. "What are you doing?" The woman dashed into the room to stop Chen-gu alongside Dr. Gao. "I'm helping her solve the issue in her heart." Chen-gu shielded the ballpoint pen in his hand. No one knew what happened to Wang Xian, but that is the source of her illness. "Just give me 1 minute, I only need 1 minute." His conviction was firm as he squatted beside the mattress with the pen in his palm. Initially, Chen-gu merely wanted to finish the pen spirit's mission, but when he saw how tortured the girl was, he felt the need to do something. "Why don't we give him a chance?" After a long confrontation, Dr. Gao chose to trust Chen-gu. "During my sessions with Wang Xian, she has never shown this kind of reaction before. Perhaps this is a good sign." Dr. Gao eventually convinced the woman, and they agreed to give Chen-gu 3 minutes. The two walked to the door, and Chen-gu stood up to close the curtains and the door. "Wang Xian, your friend has been trying to reach you." He placed the pen above the paper again and continued to chant. Pen spirit, you are my spirit from my previous life, and I am your spirit in this life." As Chen-gu continued to mumble, the girl hiding in the corner started to get increasingly feared. The nightmare-like memory that had haunted her for years started to appear in her heart. As cruel as it was, Chen-gu forced himself to continue. Not long after that, the pen hovering over the paper started to move on its own. Then, beautiful handwriting appeared on the white paper, handwriting that was different from Chen Ji's own. Wang Xian, I really didn't expect that a mindless joke would create such a lasting wound in your heart. You must hate me very much, right? Wang Xian was stunned when she saw the familiar handwriting. At that moment, her mind was blank, she also did not know what to think anymore. You have nothing to do with my death. I merely wanted to scare you when I saw you coming with another friend. Who would have thought the rope would be too tight and the chair would slip? You did nothing wrong, it was a silly prank gone very wrong. I'm so sorry, Wang Xian. I don't ask that you could forgive me, but I hope that you can remove the bad memories from your mind and strive to live the best life on behalf of the rest of us. Looking at the series of words on the white paper, Wang Xian's emotions got increasingly amped up. She leaned forward slowly and actively reached out for the ballpoint pen in Chen Ji's hand. The cold fingers slid between Chen Ji's hand and the pen, and her arm kept shaking like she had experienced the body temperature from another human in the first time. She wanted to say something, but she had lost her voice. The 3 minutes soon ended, and the ballpoint pen started to move between them, but this time, only 2 words were written. Good night. The pen stopped moving, and Chingu started to chant the incantation to send the pen spirit away. Opposite him, Wang Xian followed him as if involuntarily. Pen spirit, you are my spirit from my previous life, and I am your spirit in this life. If you wish to go, then please go ahead. When both of them finished the last word, the dam holding in Wang Xian's emotions broke, and the needle that had been stuck in her heart for so long finally fell out. She gripped Chen Ji's hands, and she turned her face to the side as if unwilling to let others see the pain that she was in. The lights of the world have been extinguished, and everyone has gone silent. What am I to do all alone? Every feeling is wrong, and every road leads to a dead end. I don't understand what I have done wrong, but I seem to have turned into a monster. Wang Xian finally uttered the words that had been kept in her heart. She looked at the words on the paper before leaning down on the table, and her voice dwindled. Help me, drag me out from this world. I want release from this pain, help me. Her forehead was pressed against the back of Chen Ji's hands, and her body lay down on the mattress. When her breathing stabilized, it seemed like Wang Xian had finally fallen asleep. Good night. Chingu pulled his hand lightly away and placed a quilt over Wang Xian before leaving the room. Both Dr. Gao and Wang Xian's adopted mother were waiting outside the door. They wanted to know what had happened inside, but afraid of disturbing Wang Xian, they kept their inquiries in a soft voice. How is Wang Xian? Chingu pointed inside the room. Already asleep. She's really asleep. Dr. Gao breathed in disbelief. He understood how difficult it was for patients with severe trauma to fall asleep normally, they would have to rely on medication. How did you do it? It's a long story. Chingu gave an explanation that was half true. When I was looking for inspiration for my haunted house at Muyang High School, I accidentally stumbled across some information related to Wang Xian's past and uncovered the reason for her depression. It appears like a scar was left in her mind after witnessing her friend's death while playing a game of pen spirit. Therefore, I used that as an opening. I simulated the pen spirit game she once played with her roommates and used that to tell her that it wasn't her fault, it was all just an accident. And it worked. Dr. Gao was impressed. The eyes of the middle-aged woman behind him were already wet. Thank you, I shouldn't have doubted you earlier, I'm sorry. It's fine. If anything, both you and Dr. Gao have done more than I did. Neither of you gave up on Wang Xian when she needed it the most, and that is the most important thing. Chingu praised both to the moon and back, improving their impression of Chingu. Wang Xian's adopted mother wanted to ask them to stay for lunch, but Chingu rejected it. When Wang Xian had fallen asleep earlier, the black phone had vibrated twice. He was in a hurry to look at its message. After exiting Fanghua, Chingu bade Dr. Gao farewell before getting on a bus to return to New Century Park. He sat on the back row, and after making sure no one was paying him any attention, he pulled out the black phone. Congratulations on completing 2-star scenario Muyang High School's hidden mission, the Pen Spirit's Wish. Activating the next part of the hidden mission. Create mannequins for the 24 spirits to possess. Successfully completed the Pen Spirit's Wish. Even though she still cannot see you, she is appreciative of your help. Would you like to employ the Pen Spirit as a member of the haunted house? Chin-guk clicked yes without reservation. Hadn't he been waiting for this moment for a long time? Spectres favored, congratulations on hiring a special type baleful spectre, the Pen Spirit. Chen Yalan, Pen Spirit, a fortune-telling opportunity daily, all questions must be within the Pen Spirit's power. The rate of a successful reading is 50%. Note, the Pen Spirit feeds on the visitor's frightful screams. The visitor's fear will improve the Pen Spirit's power, but if you keep the Pen Spirits isolated and depressed, she might decide to leave you. Chen-gu read the Pen Spirit's information again and again. He was quite excited. He had finally hired his first supernatural employee. This meant that his previous dream could be realized. He could create a theme park that he could operate on his own. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I'm sure more ghosts will join my team in the future. Chen-gu was very satisfied with the Pen Spirit. She could handle a small scenario all on her own, and her special talent could be incredibly useful. Chen-gu saw the next section of Muyang High School's hidden mission, to build mannequins for the lingering spirits of the sealed classroom to possess. Even without the mission from the black phone, Chen-gu would have done that eventually. The phone call with Inspector Lee had made Chen-gu understand why the 24 students had returned to the classroom. They were orphans, and Muyang High School was their home. With the unlocking of the new scenario, they had moved into Chen Ji's haunted house, not unlike Xiao Xiao's family. As I complete more trial missions, the underground scenario will only get bigger. I will need the help of these 24 lingering spirits to manage the sets. We both need the other. Chen Ji's plan was nice, but he needed to get the goodwill of the 24 spirits first. The first thing Chen-gu did after returning to his haunted house was sleep. He was truly exhausted by the events of the day. After being asleep for who knew how long, Chen-gu felt something crawling on his chest, like a kitten asking for attention. He opened his eyes blurrily and discovered he was hugging a small doll. Xiao Xiao. He rubbed his eyes and placed Xiao Xiao beside him. What's going on? You have a grown man like myself hugging a doll when he sleeps. Just imagine the impression it'll leave on my future wife if she sees me like this. After stretching lazily, Chen-gu glanced at the time. It was 11:59 p.m. Chen-gu put on his shoes and exited the staff break room to head for the first-floor bathroom. He merely had to pee, but as he entered the place, he discovered that the atmosphere inside the bathroom was not right. The door of the cubicle was swaying lightly, and a red hue could be seen coming from the mirror underneath the black cloth. Has the door in the mirror returned? He walked to the mirror and lifted up a corner of the black cloth. In the mirror that had cracked, the red door was half open. Chen Ji's hand froze in midair. The creepiest thing was that the door in the mirror was open at the exact same angle as in real life. Chen-gu removed the black cloth and walked to the cubicle. He turned to look at the mirror while he reached out to push the door open completely. There was nothing inside the cubicle in reality, but it was different in the mirror. The narrow cubicle was painted red, like blood was seeping out from the ceiling, walls, and floor. It was a different world. Chen-gu still did not have the courage to step into the cubicle. Holding the door knob, he wondered if he should just have the cubicle destroyed. About 10 seconds later, Chen-gu heard a weird sound that seemed very close but also far away. It felt like someone wearing wet clothes was crawling on the floor. Where is that coming from? The sound became clearer, as if it was getting close to Chen-gu. He walked out of the bathroom to peer down the corridor and then turned to look at the mirror. Finally, he confirmed that the sound was coming from inside the cubicle. Something is coming. Chen-gu knew that it was not the time to be curious. He yanked the cubicle door shut and used the nearby mop to block it before turning to look at the mirror. The sound of something heavy being dragged entered the cubicle, and soon, a pool of red bled out from underneath the door. The other thing felt like it was looking for something, and the air was heavy with the smell of blood. After several seconds, the sound moved away, and the unique smell dissipated. With his back against the wall, Chen Ji's palms were very sweaty. If he had not woken up, the thing that was crawling on the ground would have escaped, just like the mirror monster. Even with the black cloth over the mirror, the blood-red door still appears on time. Chen Gu was clueless about the world behind the cubicle door, so the only thing he could do was forget about it for now. After splashing his face with cold water, Chen Gu returned to the staff break room. When he opened the door, he realized that Xiao Xiao had disappeared again. Did she come earlier to remind me? Chen Gu sat on the side of his bed. Since he could not sleep, he took out the black phone. After he swiped on the screen, he clicked on the tab for the daily missions. Easy mission: a normal haunted house experience should not create permanent trauma to its visitors. I hope you understand this simple theory. Please improve the haunted house's security by inspecting the security threats hidden around the haunted house. Normal mission: a single hand cannot clap. A good haunted house needs a good management team. Recruit more talents, they will definitely help when the situation demands it. Nightmare mission: there has always been a second occupant inside your room, wouldn't you like to meet said person? Chen Gu was familiar with the newly updated daily missions, he had seen them before. The easy and normal missions are things that I should be doing at the current stage: more help around the place and improved security. However, in comparison, the reward of the nightmare mission is far more alluring. Without risk, there would be no reward, but the key thing was, after hiring the pen spirit, he had a fortune-telling chance every day. The way Chen Gu saw it, using it on the nightmare mission was the best use of the pen spirit's power. Holding the ballpoint pen that was taped together, Chen Gu felt embarrassed. When there's a chance, I should ask her if she wants to move to a newer pen. He grabbed a random piece of paper and placed it on the table. After invoking the pen spirit, Chen Gu asked the question that was bothering him. Can I finish the latest nightmare mission on the black phone safely? After that, Chen Gu looked at the paper for a long time. The pen shook, but there was no answer. Is the question that difficult? Chen Gu realized the pen spirit was not as powerful as he had thought. She could not answer anything related to the black phone. Looking at the ballpoint pen that had started to break, Chen Gu quickly changed his question. That question doesn't count. I want to know, has there been another person living in this room? The ballpoint pen hovered for a long time before writing yes. Then, do you know what he looks like? This time, the pen spirit did not answer. The ballpoint pen in his palm had returned to normal. Chen Gu did not blame the pen spirit, since fortune-telling was probably extremely exhausting for the pen spirit, which was probably why the limitation of one per day was in place. So, there is another person living here. How have I not noticed all this time? Based on the mission introduction, the person is another friend from the other side. There were quite a few supernatural tenants living in Chen Ji's haunted house. He did not mind any more weird spirits as long as it did not actively harm his business like the mirror ghost. After some hesitation, Chen Gu chose to accept the nightmare mission. Are you sure you want to accept the nightmare mission? Unforeseeable consequences might occur. Yes. The screen flickered, and a new message appeared. It stays in the same room as you. After you fall asleep, it will appear. If it is kind, it will wash away the negative energy and keep the household safe and healthy. If it is malicious, when you are asleep, it will stand beside your bed, thinking about how to ruin you. The game is called The Invisible Customer. At midnight, spread soaked uncooked rice around the house, place a pair of worn slippers outside the door, and light a white candle on the bedroom floor. Arrange the bed in such a way that it looks like someone is really asleep in bed. You will lie underneath the bed. For the mission to work, you have to really fall asleep. If you manage to catch a glimpse of its face, then mission will be successful. This mission will be your third nightmare mission. After completing the mission, you will randomly get a scenarios trial mission. Warning: after completing the third nightmare mission, the nightmare missions given for daily mission will be randomized, so please treat each nightmare mission carefully. Chin-gu memorized all the mission details quickly. Why must I fall asleep for the mission? How will I take a look at the person's face if I'm asleep? In my dreams? Chin-gu did not understand the meaning of this mission, but since he had accepted it, he could only follow the instructions. After putting on his jacket, Chin-gu once more visited the park canteen late at night to borrow half a bowl of white rice. The haunted house is so big, it'll be such a waste if I have to cover every floor. Chin-gu soaked the rice in cold water and spread it around the few rooms on the first floor. Then he placed a pair of slippers at the corridor entrance and lit a white candle beside his bed. After that, Chin-gu found the doll that had been left behind by his parents and the Dr. Skullcracker's hammer and placed them beside his bed. Now, everything is ready. After switching off the light, Chin-gu attached his phone to the charger and left it on the bedside table to record. He then crawled underneath the bed with the scary-looking hammer. The flickering candlelight caused the brightness inside the room to fluctuate. Once Chin-gu closed his eyes, his brain was immediately filled with many scary thoughts. He could not control it. He kept his attention on his surrounding as he curled into the fetal position, the top of his head touching the corner of the bed. From his vantage point, he could see the slippers in the corridor through the half-open door. The slippers are where they were, and the white rice has remained unmoved. I wonder why the black phone asked me to prepare these things. The candle burned shorter, and Chin-ji's eyelids grew heavier. Night spread through the haunted house, and Chin-gu, who had not really rested for the past few days, held on for a little longer before drifting off to sleep. His lower calf was a bit cold. Chin-gu opened his eyes blurrily. The candle had gone out, and the room was dark and quiet. What time is it? Chin-gu wanted to glance at his watch, but he realized he could not move. Sleep paralysis. 1. After widening his eyes, Chin-gu did not make too much resistance. He focused on adjusting his breathing. Respiratory organs like lungs were not affected by sleep paralysis. Then, he focused his energy on trying to bend his finger. Throughout the process, he did not look elsewhere but on his finger. After all, even if there was something scary, he would have been unable to move. It would only add to his fear and cause him to lose his cool. After 3 minutes, Chin-gu could finally move his pinky. This was a good start. He tried to move on to the next stage, but as his eyes swept past the open door, a question bubbled up in his mind. When I placed the slippers earlier, did the head of slippers face inward or outward? Since he would need to wear the slippers when going out, the slippers should have been facing outward, but the slippers that Chin-gu saw were pointing into his bedroom. Did I misplace them earlier? A bad feeling settled in his stomach, and he tried his best to move his other fingers. The candle in the room had long been extinguished. There was a shuffling sound like someone was moving the rice that was placed around the floor. Under Chin-ji's scrutiny, one of the slippers moved forward. It was an awkward movement, like someone learning how to walk for the first time. It moved. The more anxious Chin-gu became, the slower he progressed. After making the first step, the slippers placed on the corridor suddenly moved forward several steps like someone was putting them on. The invisible customer is already here. Why can't I see him? Just as Chin-gu was thinking, the pair of slippers had reached the door to the main control room. It suddenly stopped, and then the door to the control room fell open on its own before soon closing. The windows inside the haunted house were shut, so it could not have been the wind. What is it looking for? The pair of slippers moved up and down the dark corridor before it stopped at the door to the dressing room. From Chin-ji's angle, he could see that the black cloth over the mirror in the dressing room had been taken down, and the skin mask made from multiple faces swayed before the mirror. Chin-gu was alarmed watching this. He tried to move his fingers, but at that moment, the moving skin mask suddenly stopped, and the hollow behind the pair of eyes seemed to be staring at Chen Ji's hiding place. I've been discovered. The mask fell to the floor, and the door to the dressing room was closed. The pair of slippers stopped in front of the door before it turned toward Chen-gu and headed quick for the staff break room. Hiding under the bed with his body immobile, Chen-gu could only watch as the pair of slippers moved closer to him. The door to the break room was pushed open further, and the pair of slippers stopped beside the bed. Chen-gu closed his eyes and pretended that he was asleep. He could feel a cold draft on his face and a light breathing beside his ear, as if a face was looking closely down at him. The monster is checking whether I'm really asleep or not. Chen-gu did not dare open his eyes. He was afraid of seeing something that might make him lose control. His movement was stopped, so the best solution then was to pretend to be asleep. Several seconds later, the chilling breathing sound disappeared. Chen-gu pushed his eyes open a sliver. There was nothing before him. He moved his eyes around and saw that the pair of slippers was placed beside the bed. However, the direction was different from before, now they were facing out. It has jumped onto my bed. Just the thought of it made Chen-gu shiver. Every time he had been asleep, this thing had been wandering about the house. If the person had malicious intentions, the consequences would have been unbearable. The slippers remained unmoved for a long time. The monster was likely lying in his bed. Chen-gu realized that his chance had arrived. He directed all his energy to the one finger he could move. His pupils darted about and tried to unfreeze the rest of the body from immobility. Completing the nightmare mission was no longer that important, the feeling that his body was out of his control was horrible. After completing so many of the Black Phone's missions, Chen Ji's focus and concentration were better than most. After some time, the rest of his fingers could all move. Curling his palm into a fist, his control of his arm also slowly returned. Just a little more, a little bit more. The muscles on his arms bulged. Chen-gu had a feeling that he could wake up soon. His breathing smoothed out, and he could now turn his neck slightly. If only his legs could move, then he would have regained full control of his body. With the hammer in hand, he would be less defenseless. However, his lower body was completely unresponsive. He nudged his body, trying to turn onto his side. His heartbeat reverberated in his ears. Using every ounce of energy in his body, he finally managed to turn his body toward the wall. In that instant, he felt the shackles on his body unlock. Chen-gu gained full control of his body back, but as he turned to look behind him, his skin became covered in goosebumps. There was a girl lying behind him. The monster didn't get onto the bed. It has been behind me all along. Chen-gu involuntarily reached for the hammer beside him, and the girl lying behind him also realized that Chen-gu had woken up from the sleep paralysis. Her reaction was one beat slower. She raised her head to share a look with Chen-gu before morphing into a shadow in a hurry and rushing out of the room. Chen-gu grabbed the hammer and chased after her. When he saw the girl's face, he had felt that she looked weirdly familiar. I must have seen her somewhere before. It was not that Chen-gu had that much confidence in his memory, but the girl's face was memorable. His mind drew a blank as he chased after the girl after picking up his phone and the iron hammer. The rice on the floor turned into a mess. By the time Chen-gu exited the staff break room, the shadow had already disappeared. Where did she disappear to? The front door is closed, so she should still be inside the haunted house. Turning on the flashlight, Chen-gu noticed that the white rice formed a trail. He followed said trail to the deepest part of the first-floor corridor. The wooden boards that blocked the entrance were lifted up, and a wind could be heard blowing underneath. Chen-gu moved the boards to the side and entered the Muyang High School scenario. There was rice left on the stairs, proof that the girl had entered the same scenario. Her escape route is clear, she ran this way. The scenario was huge, but the rice on the floor helped Chen-gu navigate the place. The scenario was underground, but it had not changed from the layout of the parking lot. The trail of white rice eventually disappeared beside a bearing beam. She has hidden herself inside the beam. The bearing beam was right underneath the haunted house, supporting the whole haunted house's weight. Patting the beam, Chen-gu was reminded of a story that he had once heard from his grandparents. Apparently, there was a spirit living inside every home, and while most of them were kind spirits, there were exceptions. A kind spirit protected the house and the residents in it, a malicious spirit would ruin the family's feng shui. Normally, such spirits were the ancestors who had passed away, but there were exceptions, like the place Fan Yu and his aunt called home. This fitted the description provided by the black phone. There was an invisible customer at the haunted house, and it might be friendly or malicious. The girl hiding behind me earlier, could it be the spirit that protects the haunted house? The more he thought about it, the more convinced Chen-gu became. He walked around the beam and realized that there was a doll that had been left leaning against it. This doll was the first doll that he had made. Wait! Aren't you supposed to be in my pocket? Chen-ji's hands wandered to his pocket, and the doll was not there. Are you the person who has been living at the haunted house with me? Chen-gu bent down to pick up the doll, and when he did, he saw that the doll was covering a relatively small hole underneath it. He shone his flashlight into the hole. The space that could only fit 4 fingers had a bracelet and a paper crane inside. Neither was expensive. The bracelet was made of plastic, and it looked like a little girl's toy. The paper crane that was stuffed underneath it had become out of shape. After pulling the items out, Chen-gu saw 3 curvy words at the end of the bracelet: Luo Ruoyu. Why would there be a girl's toy inside the underground parking lot? Chen-gu studied the bracelet closer. If this bracelet belongs to that shadow, then this should be the girl's name. Surname Luo, the guardian spirit of the haunted house, a girl's toy. After connecting the clues, it hit Chen-gu. He finally remembered where he had seen the girl's face. That girl is New Century Park director Luo's daughter. When he visited Director Luo to discuss the possibility of renting the underground parking lot, he had seen the girl's photo. She was physically disabled but had the purest of smile. The girl has become the guardian spirit for the whole park. Then why would she attach herself to the doll left behind by my parents? Chen-gu felt like there was a hidden meaning to this nightmare mission. He took the doll, bracelet, and paper crane back to the staff break room. He pulled out an album from a locked drawer. The first page featured a family photo of Chen-gu and his parents. Since the picture had been taken on the day that the construction of the haunted house had finished, the background of the picture was the haunted house. In the picture, Chen-ji's father stood proudly in the middle. He was as happy as a child. Chen-gu, who had still been attending school then, stood quietly to the side, looking at the camera with a trace of impatience on his face. His mother stood beside his father, but as he looked closer, his mother's hand was hanging in mid-air, and her fingers were curved like they were holding someone's hand. There are 4 people in the picture. Flipping through the album, Chen-gu found another picture that was weirder. His father was pointing at the haunted house, talking to Chen-gu, while his mother half-squatted on the floor, her hands touching something in the air. There were many other similar pictures, and looking at them, Chen-gu felt his heart chill. Ever since he was young, he had wondered why he had to leave a huge space during picture time. Now he understood it. They sure were nice to the ghosts. It is probably because of them that I'm favored by the specters. Chen-gu did not expect Director Luo's daughter to have attached herself to the doll left behind by his parents, and from the looks of it, she had stayed with them for a long time already. Director Luo's daughter was the guardian spirit of the park, so she could not leave the park. This explained why the doll was only useful inside the haunted house and the park. It was why, when Wang Qi tried to ambush Chen-gu at the wooden hut behind Ping An Apartments, the doll had not reacted. There were many other such occasions as well. Chen-gu closed the album and lightly rubbed his temple. He had a feeling that the mission was more than it seemed. He moved his gaze away from the doll and the bracelet to fall on the paper crane. The material was normal, but it was dirted by a blood stain. This paper crane does not look new, it should have been inside that hole for a long time already. Opening the paper crane, several words could be seen written on the bloodied paper: the third room of the third sick hall. The third sick hall. Chen Ji's heart started to quiver when he saw those words. After completing 3 nightmare missions, one of the trial missions would be unlocked. Before this, Chen Gu had already prepared to select the trial mission for the third sick hall because it was the only 3-star mission carried by the black phone. The handwriting looks similar to my parents', but why would they leave behind a clue to a location? Is the third room in the third sick hall related to their disappearance? Chen Gu put the paper aside, and his brain was mulling on another problem. The black phone said that after completing the 3 nightmare missions, the missions in the future will be randomized. This means that the first 3 nightmare missions are fixed. The first mission opened the door to the other world, the second mission told me my parents are still alive but missing, this third mission gave me a venue. Buying my trust, giving me hope, and then providing me with an investigative direction. The 3 nightmare missions are related to each other, and they are more meaningful than they appear. The 3 nightmare missions were like the new player missions given in such games. They had certain risks, but they also helped new players familiarize themselves with the game. Looks like only after completing the first 3 nightmare missions can one be considered a real player. Chen Gu held the bloodied paper in his hand, and he discovered that his emotions were still raging. Every single mission so far had been a real threat, but until now, he had been in the kiddie pool, so just how difficult would the later missions be? After putting away the note with the hint, Chen Gu slowly resigned himself to his fate. The most difficult missions so far had been the 2 trial missions. The most dangerous presence at Ping An Apartments was the people. Muyang High School was creepy, but the lingering spirits inside it had meant no harm. Therefore, technically speaking, the missions were not that dangerous. Looks like from 3-star scenarios onwards, the situation will be different. I'll probably encounter malicious specters then. In any case, Chen Gu could only power forward. This paper had probably been left behind by his parents, so no matter what, he had to pay the location a visit. Chen Gu then pulled out the black phone. When he saw the girl's face, the nightmare mission had been completed. Specters favored, congratulations for completing the nightmare mission, obtained reward elementary skill, dollmaker's talent. Utilizing real humans as your model, carve, cut, join, and shine each bone, paint the skin, sew up the wounds, and pair it with a flawless face. Provide it to a homeless spirit, and you will have created your first living doll. That mission was your 3rd nightmare mission. After completing the mission, you were rewarded with a randomized scenarios trial mission. Would you like to draw the trial mission now? Warning: after completing the 3rd nightmare mission, the nightmare missions given for daily missions will be randomized, so please treat each nightmare mission carefully. Similar to when he obtained the mortician's makeup skill, some new memories and techniques appeared in Chen Ji's mind. Other than that, there was no visible change. Dolls and mannequins are integral parts of a haunted house. This skill will be incredibly helpful for the management of a haunted house. It's just a coincidence that there are 24 lingering spirits in Muyang High School that need them. I can use them to test out this skill. Chen Gu had skipped over whether the spirits would like to live his dolls or not. After finishing the dolls and pushing the spirits into them, it will most likely complete Muyang High School's hidden mission. There were not enough mannequins in the Night of the Living Dead scenario, and his haunted house did not possess the facilities to mass-produce a bunch of mannequins. Tomorrow morning, I should go around to look for a workshop that can help me produce mannequins. Hopefully, the price won't be too exorbitant. Chen Gu continued to look through the black phone. He was hesitating over whether he should draw the trial mission or not. In the end, he did not think that he was ready to take on a 3-star trial mission. After dealing with all that, Chen Gu reached for his phone, ended the video, and cut the part where the slippers entered the room on their own and stopped beside his bed. Whenever I fell asleep, the slippers walked to the bed on their own. After giving it a random name, Chingu uploaded this video that was only 11 seconds long to the app. Despite its length, the effect was much better than the bathtub video. In less than several minutes, it had over more than 100 views and 50 shares. The comment section, which had been quiet for so long, started to get rambunctious again. Small and weak. Your video is similar to your weight. Can someone tell me why the slippers can move on their own? Have you photoshopped yourself out of the video? Am I mistaken? Or is there someone hiding under the bed? I see it, too. But there appears to be two of them. What in heaven's name is this? Whenever Chingu released a video, his number of followers would increase. After reading the comments for another 2 minutes, he logged out of his account and went back to sleep. When Chingu woke up the next morning, he cleared the white rice away and cleaned the haunted house before waiting for the park to open. The lack of employees is a problem. If only the pen spirit could help me sell tickets. Chingu started to plan internally. The Minghun scenario allowed a maximum capacity of 3 visitors at a time, but Murder by Midnight and Muyang High School were different. For Murder by Midnight, the more the visitors, the more exciting it would be. Muyang High School covered a large space, and even if 8 people entered it at the same time, as long as he handled the rhythm well, scaring them dumb was still possible. After completing Muyang High School's hidden mission, should have Suwon manage the Murder by Midnight scenario, and I'll enter the Muyang High School scenario. That way, 2 scenarios can operate at the same time. After making the plan, Chingu went online to look for a mannequin workshop near Western Zhejiang, and he was pleased to discover that there was one close to New Century Park. In fact, the place's main customer had once been New Century Park. This meant that the deterioration of the park had brought about the place's demise as well. It seemed that the owner was about to let the place go. The park opened punctually at 9 a.m. The number of overall visitors was dwindling, but the line before the haunted house was increasing. Before, it was Chingu holding the stack of flyers in his hands, watching on with envy as the visitors walked past his haunted house. Even the line for the merry-go-round used to be longer than the line for his haunted house, but now the situation had flipped. Please stay patiently in line. Every scenario costs 20. For those of you who want to experience a different scenario after the first one, please return to the back to the line. Chingu had Suwon enter the haunted house to prepare while he stayed outside to maintain order. When he was selling tickets, the black phone suddenly vibrated. The day has just started, and there's already a message. Chingu stood where he was and pulled out the phone. The midnight ticket counter's effect has been triggered. A special visitor has appeared. Please make use of this opportunity, the results will be different based on your choices. Another trigger. Chingu was dazed for a moment before his eyes swept over the line of visitors. Who could this special visitor be? Chin Ji's eyes widened when his gaze reached the end of the line. The person saw him as well because he waved at Chingu. Dr. Gao. Chingu sent 2 visitors into the Minghun scenario before he walked over to Dr. Gao and studied the man closely. Why are you here? To find you, of course. Dr. Gao was in a suit, so he did not look like a typical park visitor. I knew that you are no longer a student, but I'm surprised you own a haunted house. It's a family business. Chingu pocketed his black phone and said, then, how can I help you? It's like this, I have stumbled across a unique patient. His situation is similar to the boy you once told me about, so I wish to ask you some questions. Same condition as the boy. He also likes to visit haunted houses. Dr. Gao had managed to pique Chin Ji's curiosity. Low-spirited with occasional outbursts. Prefers to be alone in dark places because it gives him a sense of security. Whether he likes to visit haunted houses or not, I'm not so sure. Dr. Gao moved to the side to reveal the young man behind him. Men Nan, my student, he came to me with his illness about 3 weeks ago. The person behind Dr. Gao was in his 20s, slight of frame, had a tense face, high cheekbones, and dark circles around his eyes. Standing under the sun, tiny droplets of sweat seeped out of his forehead. The young man seemed to be in a tense state, with his head lowered, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Surname Men. Chen-gu tried to make conversation. That's rare, nice to meet you. The young man's reaction was weird. He kept his head lowered, and his eyes scanned Chen-gu quickly before softly replying, nice to meet you. After examining the young man for some time, Chen-gu pulled Dr. Gao to the side. But, Dr. Gao, why did you bring him here? If you plan to let him visit the haunted house, I'm not responsible if anything happens to him. Men Nan was a cheerful, confident child, one of my brightest students. He is incredibly talented in the field of personality psychology. Personality psychology? One of the branches of psychology. Generally speaking, it is the science of understanding human behavior. Okay. Chen-gu nodded even though he still did not quite get it. His symptoms appeared 3 weeks ago without any warning. There is usually a trigger to psychological illnesses, mostly related to one's family or living environment. However, Men Nan lives alone, and his environment has not undergone any changes recently, so I'm stumped, Dr. Gao whispered, obviously trying to not let Men Nan hear him. After many sessions, his condition has not improved. If anything, it is deteriorating. The young man has always been a patient fellow, but recently, he has been experiencing violent mood swings. He got into a scuffle recently with a classmate simply because the animal patterns on the curtain did not match, and he injured a random stranger simply because the number of sesame seeds on the bun kept changing whenever he counted them. The reasons for his anger sure are unique. Whenever one is under the torment of psychological pressure, even the smallest provocation can lead to an explosion of emotions. Men Nan's actions made me realize he was in deep pain. But why would you bring him to me? Chen-gu looked at Dr. Gao and Men Nan. The special visitor was probably one of them. Wang Xian's illness has improved greatly. Her symptoms that were deteriorating improved after meeting you, Dr. Gao said with a smile. I'm not a stubborn person. No matter the method, as long as it can cure the patient, it is a good method. I am deeply disturbed by the pain he is in, so I wish for you to lend me a hand. Go on then. Chen-gu did not reject Dr. Gao. Can you repeat what you did for Wang Xian on Men Nan? After all, from what we know so far, Men Nan, Wang Xian, and the boy we discussed about before all suffer from the same illness. Chen-gu hesitated after hearing Dr. Gao's words. He did not expect that would be the reason behind the doctor's visit. What he had done for Wang Xian had probably greatly impressed the senior psychologist, and that was why he had come up with this request. However, Chen-gu knew the truth. The only reason Chen-gu could help Wang Xian was because he knew the past from the Pen Spirit, and the Pen Spirit herself had come to assist Wang Xian. The method could not be copied, it was specific to the case. Is it going to be a problem for you? Dr. Gao saw the hesitation on Chen Ji's face. If it's too much trouble, then forget I ever ask. After all, I'm just hoping for the best here. This child has immense talent, but if I put him under medication, it will cause great side effects on his body and mind, I'm afraid it will ruin his future. It's difficult but not impossible. If you want me to help, at least let me know a little bit more about him. Chen-gu did not reject directly. One of them was the special visitor, and every special visitor was a hidden treasure who he must not let go easily. Then I will thank you in advance on behalf of the child. The smile returned to Dr. Gao's face as he called Men Nan over. Men Nan, come and tell us what has been bothering you. The young man kept his head lowered. No matter who he was talking to, his head remained in that posture, like someone was pressing him down on his skull. Noting the young man's silence, Dr. Gao sighed before filling in for him. 3 weeks ago, he suddenly came to see me, saying he suspected that he was suffering from depression. We are professionals ourselves, and after an afternoon of diagnosis, I discovered that his symptoms were different from normal depression. At most, he was feeling overly agitated and tired. At the time, I did not think too much of it, but his situation worsened. He would spend the whole day not saying a single word and get into altercations with the slightest provocation. I analyzed it for a long time before coming to a conclusion that he would not admit he is afraid, very afraid of something that is hidden inside his heart. I suspect that he is suffering from a fear complex, but when I examine his surroundings, I cannot find anything that could cause fear. After I asked him again and again, he finally admitted the truth. Dr. Gao looked at Men Nan with concern in his eyes. Starting 3 weeks ago, he has been having the same dream every night. The mention of the dream made Men Nan shudder. This was something he was afraid of facing the most. What kind of dream? Chengu had imagined many scary scenarios, but Dr. Gao's answer surprised him. He dreamed about washing his hair. Washing his hair. Chengu did not know what to say. I'll let him fill you in on the rest. Dr. Gao placed his hand on Men Nan's shoulder and nudged him slightly, probably to make him relax. After a long time, Men Nan opened his lips. It is the same dream every time, and it is becoming clearer and clearer. Soon, I'll be able to see the person's face. His voice sounded raw, like his throat had been burned. Who is this person? There's another person in your dream? Yes, he always appears beside me to watch me wash my hair. He looks scary and dangerous, as if the moment I close my eyes, he will rush over to strangle me. Chengu and Dr. Gao were silent for a long time. Washing the head meant washing away bad luck and dirt. In dream theory, it meant a good thing was about to happen, but what Men Nan described had nothing good about it. It sounded like a nightmare. Can you still remember the face of the person in your dream and your surroundings? Men Nan was most likely the special visitor mentioned by the black phone. Therefore, the choice Chengu made could influence the final reward. The dream feels like it happened inside my rental's bathroom. The placement of the things looked familiar, but I am not so sure. Men Nan pushed down his head, and his voice weakened even more. I haven't been able to get a good look of the person standing beside me, but I am certain he is getting closer to me. These few weeks, I have been having the same dream, and with each passing night, the dream keeps getting clearer, and I have a clearer view of the man's face. What does he look like? Soon, in the next dream, I will be able to see his face, Men Nan said with his head lowered. When he spoke, only his pupils moved upwards. It looked creepy. What the young man said was very vague. There was no worthwhile information. Chengu did not give up and continued to press him. Can you give me more details? For instance, what was the man up to when you were washing your head? Or has he said anything? The content of the dream is almost always the same. Men Nan's raw voice was shaking. When I had this dream for the first time 3 weeks ago, it wasn't that scary. In the dream, I woke up in the middle of the night to enter the bathroom. There were no thoughts in my mind then, and my body was merely moving on its own. It felt like some foreign force had taken over me. Initially the dream was fuzzy. I stopped before the mirror to fill up the basin with water before putting my head into it. When I bent over with my head lowered, I could see someone standing at the front door upside down. At the beginning, he was standing far away from me. It was not until I finished washing my head that I realized he seemed to have moved closer, but only just a little bit. After the dream was over, I had other dreams, so I didn't pay it much attention initially. But the next day, I had the same dream again. Everything was the same. I walked into the bathroom, stood before the mirror, filled the basin with water, and then bent over to put my head into the water. When my hair touched the surface of the water, I could see someone standing in the living room. When I was done, the person once again moved closer to me. The same dream kept repeating. Initially, it felt like every other dream, but as it repeated itself, everything became clearer and clearer. My brain was moving during the dream, and my senses were active, but the key issue was the man who came in from the door inched closer to me with each dream. In my dream, I'm scared out of my wits, but I simply cannot wake up. The moment I fall asleep, the dream continues. In the dream 2.5 weeks ago, the man entered the living room. 1 week ago, the man appeared next to the toilet. In the dream 4 days ago, the man appeared beside me. He was standing beside me. The moment I bent down to push my head into the water, his body would lean alongside me with the fuzzy face inching closer. Chen-gu had chills just from Men Nan's description. He could not imagine the trauma for the young man who had experienced it personally. Having the same dream for 3 weeks with an unclear man inching closer, no wonder he ended up in this state. The night before last, I had the same dream again, and it was also the last time. Men Nan tried to raise his head, and Chen-gu saw that his eyes were darting about rapidly. The man's face was so close that I thought I could take a good look, but at that moment, he used his hands to strangle my neck. Then, I woke up, and I haven't gone back to bed since then. Men Nan's situation was dire. The man in his dream was strangling him. If the dream was allowed to continue, who knew what would have happened? No wonder Dr. Gao came to Chen-gu, he was probably the last resort. Repetitious dream you say, and they are all in the bathroom. Chen-gu thought about it and said, could it be a problem with the apartment itself? I'm just stating a possibility, so don't be afraid. Go on. Is it possible that someone died in the room you rented, and the body hasn't been discovered, so the person appears in your dream, hoping you will call the police on his behalf? When Chen-gu finished, Men Nan's face was green. He took in a very deep breath. There's a body hiding in my room? Impossible. His emotions started to go haywire. If not for Dr. Gao's hands on his shoulders, his illness probably would have kicked in. Dr. Gao added with a curious expression, I've been to his rental room and examined the place inside out, there is nothing weird about it. Furthermore, 1 week ago, I did invite Men Nan to stay with me. He still experienced the same dream, it did not stop due to a change in location. When he had the dream for the first time, the man was standing at the front door, so the man probably came from the outside. This means that we cannot limit our investigation to Men Nan's room. We should expand the scope of investigation to include the whole apartment building. Chen-gu gave his opinion. Afraid of provoking Men Nan, he did not give the latter part of his suspicion. The ghost had probably attached itself to Men Nan, so it could not be solved by sleeping elsewhere. We are not police, so we don't have the right to search the rest of the building. Dr. Gao now had second thoughts about coming to Chen-gu. We should focus on analyzing this dream. Men Nan kept repeating the action of washing his hair. Perhaps we will be able to discover something if we understand what that action stands for. Dr. Gao tried to advise Chen-gu, and Chen-gu did listen to the doctor's explanation patiently, but his speculation could not explain why Men Nan kept having the same dream. I can't be sure for now, so why don't we see what happens tonight? How about we go to Men Nan's apartment? Perhaps a new pair of eyes might bring some new discoveries. Chen-gu waited patiently for them to answer. He put his hands into his pockets from the special visitor alert. Until now, the black phone had not reacted. Dr. Gao seemed to have his own reservations. I'm afraid Men Nan might not be able to survive until tonight, his condition is getting worse. With his head lowered, Men Nan maintained his weird posture. His pupils darting about but completely silent. But there's no better option. Chen-gu knew what Dr. Gao wanted to say. His condition is completely different from Wang Xian's, so I'm helpless as well. But if you trust me, let me go to his apartment to take a look tonight, and perhaps I will find something. Other than that, I have another question to ask him. Chen-gu walked to Men Nan's side and slowly used his hand to swipe above the young man's head and spine. What are you doing? Dr. Gao was confounded. Dr. Gao, have you noticed that regardless of whether he was talking or walking, he kept his head lowered? It felt like there was something pressing on him on his skull. Chen-gu had noticed this a long time ago, but he did not have the chance to inquire about it. Men Nan, don't you think it's difficult to maintain a posture like that? Reminded by Chen-gu, Dr. Gao patted Men Nan on his back. Are you still feeling uncomfortable? Men Nan waved his hands, but he kept his head lowered. Standing for quite some time in the crowd seemed to have taken a toll on him. He looked like he could lose control at any moment. Noticing this, Dr. Gao quickly led Men Nan to a darker location for him to rest. The frequency at which Men Nan's pupils move about is not normal. He kept looking around him, and he has a habit of rolling his pupils upwards like he is trying to see above his head. Chen Gu looked at Men Nan's shadow, and the more he looked at the young man, the more confused he felt. If one was naturally a little bit hunchback, one's spine would be arched, but Men Nan's back was straight, and only his head fell downwards. It gave the impression that there was something heavy sitting on his head. Washing his head, why would he experience dream like that? There was still no reaction from the black phone. Chen Gu ignored it. A special visitor was an additional bonus. It was good if he could get it, but he would not feel bad if he did not either. After sending away 2 batches of visitors, Men Nan's situation improved. Dr. Gao was indeed an expert at counseling. Men Nan, who appeared like he was going to lose his mind, became sedated and calm around Dr. Gao. He led Men Nan to see Chen Gu again. They seem to have come to a decision. 8 p.m. tonight. We will see you at Hai Ming Apartments. Okay, Chen Gu promised, and the black phone vibrated. Let him fall asleep normally tonight, and I will keep a vigil over him. I'll accompany you. Dr. Gao thanked Chen Gu before leaving with Men Nan. Yet another weird case. Chen Gu roughly grasped the meaning of special visitor. They weren't ghosts per se but people trapped in the line between the 2 worlds. As soon as they left, he checked the black phone. The second special visitor has left. Through your effort, you have unlocked the mission information. Unlocked hidden trial mission A room of 3. A room of 3, 1-star scream factor. Arrive at Hai Ming apartment before midnight and find out the reason behind the special visitor's illness. Mission venue, Hai Ming apartment room 303. Mission hint, he came from the 3rd sick hall. Do you want to accept the mission? Warning, the trial mission is only active for 24 hours. If you do not accept it within this time limit, it'll be taken as forfeit, and this scenario will stay locked forever. Chen Gu did not pay much attention to this hidden mission, at least not until he saw the mission hint. It's related to the 3rd sick hall. He came from the 3rd sick hall. Men Nan has been treated inside the 3rd sick hall. Reading the mission details again, Chen Gu found a more curious coincidence. The number 3 was repeated many times. Could this be a coincidence? But what is the meaning of this room of 3? Either 2 ghosts were living in Men Nan, or Chen Gu, Dr. Gao, and Men Nan would make up the 3 in the room. In any case, since it was related to a 3-star scenario, Chen Gu did not dare to be too careless. He memorized the mission details and made sure he did not miss anything before putting away the black phone. He contacted Su Wan to have her sell tickets while Chen Gu entered the murder by midnight scenario to act as the ghost. There was no accident. During lunch break, Chen Gu did not join Su Wan at the canteen, but he moved alone to the park office. After discovering the presence of Director Luo's daughter, Chen Gu had a few questions for Director Luo. He took the elevator to the top floor. The door to Director Luo's office was open. The man did not seem to like the idea of trapping himself in an enclosed room. Chen Gu knocked on the door lightly, and Director Luo soon came out to greet him, carrying several reports in his hands. Director Luo, I have a few questions for you, do you have some time? Director Luo put the reports down. Problems with the underground parking lot? No, it's not that but something else. Chen Gu placed Luo Ruoyu's bracelet and the paper left behind by his parents on Director Luo's desk. These are the things I found in the underground parking lot beside a support beam. What is it that you wish to know? Director Luo recognized the bracelet. There are plenty of toys left in unnoticeable corners around the park. I left them there personally. Why would you do that? All the toys are my daughter's favorites. I placed them around the park so that when she returned, she would not feel so lonely. Then did you place other things alongside the toys, like this? Chen-go pushed the bloodied note to Director Luo. Director Luo shook his head after looking at it twice. I have no recollection of this, it wasn't me. After getting the answer from Director Luo, Chen-go was slightly disappointed. He had assumed that, as the director of New Century Park, Director Luo would know a thing or two about his parents' disappearance, but he was wrong. Director Luo did not even know about his own daughter's return to the park. His parents seemed to have hidden a lot of secrets. Then, I'm sorry for disturbing you. Chen-go picked up the note and prepared to leave. Wait a minute. Director Luo stood up slowly and signaled for Chen-go to show him the note. This is your father's handwriting, isn't it? Yes, you can recognize it. Chen-go was surprised. Not everyone would pay attention to people's handwriting. The third sick hall, Director Luo read the words on the paper before confirming. Right before your parents disappeared, I heard them mention this place. You heard them mention that? Chen Ji's interest was piqued. Yes, the day before your parents' disappearance, they came to me, saying someone wanted to give me a present. However, due to various complications, said person could not be there and thus entrusted the task to them. Director Luo took a wooden box from the nearby bookshelf. After opening the box, it revealed a roughly hewn roly-poly toy. He held the toy in his palm. Even though the making is rough, I appreciate the meaning. No matter the difficulty, it will stand up again. Chen-go was anxious, and he urged, what did my parents say after that? Where did you hear those few words? Your parents left after they gave me the gift. Since I have a habit of not closing my office door, I accidentally overheard their conversation in the corridor. Director Luo thought to himself before continuing. At the time, they had not wandered far from the door. Your father said something like, the door to the third sick hall has been opened again. And your mother replied, the door wasn't closed in the first place. That's it. That's all I could hear. They did continue the conversation, but I could not hear them clearly. After chatting for a few more minutes and confirming that there was nothing more Director Luo could give him, Chen-go exited his office. The door to the third sick hall has to be something more than a literal door. Could it be similar to the door in the haunted house's mirror? Could there be another world behind the door? He could not understand why his parents would say something like that. He pulled out the black phone to read the mission hint again. It said, he came from the third sick hall. Does it mean that he came from the bloody world, similar to the mirror monster? The day before their disappearance, Chen Ji's parents had been discussing the third sick hall. Did this mean that their disappearance was related to it? He knew that his parents had disappeared around an abandoned hospital. The police had searched all the nearby buildings but found nothing. Now, Chen-go suspected that his parents had entered the door and traveled to the other world. It's still too soon to confirm the mission venue for the third sick hall is the hospital that my parents disappeared in. Chen-go patted his face lightly to force himself to calm down. Since it was related to his parents, his emotions were unsettled. The mission has 3 stars, so it must be dangerous. Even if I accept it now, I might not be able to complete it. I'd better focus on the immediate mission for now. The trial mission at Hai Ming Apartments was related to the third sick hall. Completing this mission would provide more understanding of the third sick hall, so it was not a bad place to start. At 4 p.m., the number of visitors slowed. Chen-go handed the key to the haunted house to Su Wan, and he crawled into the props room to prepare for the trial mission that night. The doll left behind by his parents was the park's guardian spirit, so it was only useful inside the park. Therefore, Chen-go did not bring it along with him this time. Looking at his choices, Chen-go eventually settled on the phone charger, lighter, safety rope, and the incredibly handy multi-purpose mallet. That should be enough. He thought about it before shoving the reward money that he had left from the Ping and apartment case into his backpack. It's early. Perhaps I should go to the mannequin shop first. If the price is right, I can directly give the down payment. The quicker he finished Muyang High School's hidden mission, the earlier he would reap the reward. After some cleaning up, when Chingu passed the dressing room, he accidentally saw Xiao Xiao, who was hiding behind the door. The fake blood was splattered all over the floor, and there was some on Xiao Xiao as well. What are you doing? Chingu picked up Xiao Xiao and asked Su Wan to help clean the place before returning to the staff break room. A roomful of fake blood, Su Wan must have thought it was my handiwork. Will she think her boss has lost his mind? Chingu used a towel to wipe the fake blood off Xiao Xiao's body. He pinched her face, threatening, "If you continue to be naughty, I'll." He was stuck because he could not figure out what Xiao Xiao was afraid of. Eventually, he huffed and shoved Xiao Xiao into his backpack as well. After everything was ready, Chingu exited the haunted house and the park. The park visitor number was dwindling, and the open-air car park was empty. There was not even a line at the bus stop. Maintaining the park requires plenty of money. With so few visitors, it mustn't be easy for Director Luo. After crossing the road, Chingu looked for the mannequin workshop using the information on the internet. He saw the sign hanging above a door that led underground. When he asked the hawker on the street, Chingu was told that the workshop was underground. Walking down the steps, the walls on both sides were covered in scrawling that he could not appreciate, and at the end of the step was a glass door with the sign "For Rent/Sale." Is anyone in? Chingu looked through the glass room. The interior looked like an underground storeroom. The place was huge but empty. After waiting for some time, a slightly overweight man answered the door in his slippers. He looked roughly the same age as Chingu. He was in very casual attire and had some baby fat on his face. The glass door opened, and Chingu was blasted in the face by the air conditioning. "You are the boss. I wish to order a set of custom-made mannequins," Chingu explained. "Okay, come in." The man invited Chingu into the shop. "How big do you want it? If it's under 30 centimeters, you can get it under 3 days. That's too small. I want something the size of a real person, and the joints all need to be movable. Can you do something like that?" Chingu looked at the equipment inside the workshop. The place was more professional than it appeared on the outside. Similar size to a real person. With movable parts. Comprehension dawned for the man. With an understanding look, he asked, "How many do you want?" 24, when you can finish the order." Chingu answered. 24, the man asked in a raised pitch. The shout scared Chingu. "Why are you screaming so suddenly? Is 24 too many for the workshop to produce? All for your personal use? What use would I have for the mannequins?" Chingu realized the man had misunderstood him, so he explained, "I own a haunted house, the mannequins are part of the set design." "Okay," the man sighed in relief. "If it's for a haunted house, I don't suggest using too expensive filler. After all, the exhaustion rate is too high. We can make 2 types here, solid base and half-solid base. The most expensive 12,000, cheapest 3,000. Also, I have to remind you, all the workers have left, and I've been left alone to look after the place. So, 24 custom-made mannequins will probably take a month to be completed. The cheapest costs 3,000. Chingu coughed, and his hand moved involuntarily to the 20,000 or so in his backpack. He uttered in a calm voice, "Money is not a problem, but the new scenario will be open in a few days. I need the mannequins to be finished soon. You said that you don't have enough employees to rush the order, but do you have the materials here?" "I do." The boss did not know why Chingu would suddenly ask that. "If you give us a few more days, I'm sure you'll be satisfied with the result. The haunted house will open the new scenario for visitation the day after tomorrow. There can be no delay. We're not doing so well. Did you not see the sign in the window? Before this, I was only responsible for the designs, and the workers would handle the rest. But since there have been no large orders, I sent them all away to save money. The boss also did not want to give up on Chen Ji's order so easily. How about this, I will call the workers tonight, and I will have them rush the order for you in a week. A week is still too long, I need them the day after tomorrow. The boss sighed helplessly. Even if we work at full speed, I can only give you 3 or 4 mannequins the day after tomorrow. You have enough materials but not the workers. Chen Gu put down his backpack. How about this, lend your workshop to me for 24 hours. You only need to prepare the materials for me. Huh. As the conversation continued, it started to head down a weird direction. The boss did not quite react to it yet, then what shall I do? Just stand to the side and watch. Chen Gu moved his fingers and looked around the space. After all, it's not like you have other customers. After the place is sold, the stored materials will be disposed of or sold at a low price. Since that's the case, you might as well lease the place to me for a day. Don't worry, I will purchase the materials at market price. The man had a point, but something felt off. The boss thought about it and realized he had nothing to lose. Looking at the excited Chen Gu, he nodded with difficulty. Alright, but you have to give me 10,000 as deposit. I'll remove the material price from the deposit, and I'll return the rest when you're finished. You have a deal. After paying the boss, Chen Gu entered the workspace. The place was huge, and multiple tools covered the floor. You sure you want to do this yourself? The boss was still hesitant. If you need it, I can help. After all, I'm free. Then, I shall thank you in advance. Chen Gu was familiar with the tools because he had spent his internship at a toy factory. He took a tour, and after a plan formed in his mind, he pulled out his phone to call Inspector Li. Uncle Li, I have a favor to ask, it's related to Muyang High School. The station has already closed the case. Why are you still so hung up over Muyang High School? Every time Inspector Li answered Chen Ji's call, his heart would quiver in worry, afraid that he might hear some bad news. It's not related to the case, I just want to stop getting involved with the school. Inspector Li became serious. According to the main city's investigation, there might be a darker history there before the school was built. A darker history? Chen Gu did not press him. Inspector Li, you misunderstood me, I don't intend to meddle in police business. Didn't you tell me that a whole class got into an accident last time? I just want to ask if you have a picture of all 24 students. Have you lost your mind? Why do you need something like that? It's very important, but I cannot tell you the reason for now. I swear it's not for malicious use. Chen Gu was planning to build bodies for the 24 lingering spirit to possess so that they would not be homeless anymore. In a way, he was doing a good thing. The phone was silent for a long time before Inspector Li said, "Don't do anything stupid. Call me if you find out anything. I'll take a look in a bit." After hanging up the phone, Chen Gu did not think too much of it, but he scared the boss speechless. The man hesitated for some time before sidling up to Chen Gu to ask, "Are you a cop?" "No, have you prepared the materials?" "Yes." Even the tone used by the boss had gotten more reverential. "Alright, it's time to start working." Chen Gu and the boss went to prepare the clay first. 10 minutes later, Inspector Li sent a group photo with 26 people and said it was the only picture they had in the files. There was a bespectacled senior sitting in the middle of the photo, and behind him stood 25 students. It's a lot easier with the picture as a guide. Chen Gu thanked the boss before asking him to move away. He carved out a rough head shape from the clay before activating his skill, dollmaker's talent. Using the different types of carving knives, Chen Gu made a human skull that was similar to the face on the picture in less than few minutes. His pair of hands were as delicate as flying butterflies as he masterfully employed the carving knives. The ease with which Chen Gu conducted his work stunned the boss, it felt like he was watching an art documentary sped up thrice. What is this person's actual occupation? After he was done with the carving, Gu used the wet sponge to carefully wipe down the skulls. His touch was so masterful that after he wiped the dust away, a skin-like consistency appeared on the clay body. After a while, the clay body hardened, and Gu sprayed it with sticky plaster. Then, there was nothing left to do but wait. The plaster needed at least 1 hour to dry. Utilizing this downtime, Gu went to work on something else. After 1.5 hours, Gu finished all the clay bodies. Then he retrieved the first few clay bodies from the hardened plaster. He slathered them with a layer of latex, which would act as the mannequin's skin. After applying the latex, Gu inserted a bendable stick into the clay body. This would act as the mannequin's spine. Finally, he injected the filler. Everything was completed in one fell swoop. Gu only needed 10 minutes to finish one fake mannequin head. It's getting late. Take this 10,000 as the deposit, and don't touch anything in the work area. I'll be back to finish the rest tomorrow. Gu washed his hands and planned to leave for Hai Ming Apartments. Don't worry, I won't go anywhere near them. Looking at the 24 heads left on the counter, the boss shivered. He had seen many mannequins in his life, but the mannequins created by Ji's hands gave him a different impression. They were exceptionally real, like they would wink at him at any moment. Shrugging on his backpack, Gu exited the underground workshop. He hailed a cab to head toward Hai Ming Apartments. It was about time for his meeting with Dr. Gao. Hai Ming Apartments was situated at the older part of town where the buildings were not high. After crossing several busy streets, the surroundings turned quiet. With the directions given by the taxi driver, Gu finally arrived at his destination. Ji's shadow was quite long under the street light. There was not one person on the road other than the occasional street cat, which shuffled noisily across the street. Who would have thought such a quiet street is hiding in the city? Gu walked down the road between the buildings, deeper into the residential area. There was a light horrid smell in the air. The trash that littered the street had been left there for a long time. The trash spilled out of the trash bags, and some critters occasionally squirmed out from them. Compared to the few buildings that faced the road, the building Gu arrived at looked more dilapidated. There were dirty stains on the building walls, and there was a lot of trash crowding the stairs. Gu glanced at the time. It was 7:54 p.m. It might be rather inconvenient after Dr. Gao arrives, so perhaps I should go take a look around first. He did not call Dr. Gao but entered the stairs directly. The ceiling of each floor was low. They were perhaps about 2.1 meters. The railings were made of iron, and at every interval, there was a piece of red string tied around it, but Gu had no idea what purpose they served. After entering the building, a weird smell hit Gu. It was very light, and it was not particularly smelly. Those who stayed there might have gotten used to it already, but Gu was a first-time visitor, so he was sensitive to the smell. It smells like food that has gone sour. Gu stopped for a while at the first floor to search for the source of the smell but came up with nothing. The smell seemed to come from the building itself, seeping out from every brick. There was no light in the corridor, so Gu took out his phone for light. There were 4 rooms on the first floor, and it appeared very cramped. The sound insulation was not that perfect, so Gu could hear the sound coming from within even though he stood outside. Gu snuck up to the 3rd floor. He did not knock on the door to room 303 but stood outside the door to listen in. There were also 4 rooms on the 3rd floor. The television in 301 was very loud. There was a man in 302 speaking on the phone, and it sounded like he was in a heated argument. Gu could hear him repeat 2 sentences constantly: "Stop forcing me. Do you two wish to push me to my death?" There was no sound coming from room 303 and 304, they were very quiet. After 2 minutes, Gu tapped on the door to room 303 lightly. Interestingly enough, when he did so, the television volume in 301 decreased, and the man in 302 got off his phone. The whole 3rd floor became eerily quiet. Gu knocked on the door for a full minute, but there was no answer. He called out softly, "Men Nan. Are you home?" There was no answer. Just as Chingu thought he had gotten the wrong address, the door to 301 opened. An unshaven middle-aged man leaned against the frame, and the haze of alcohol formed a miasma around him. "Hey, who are you looking for?" "Men Nan in 303, he's a student at Zhejiang Medical University. I heard he's not feeling well, so I came to visit him." "You got the wrong place. I have no idea who this Men Nan is, but I'm sure he is not living in 303. The man scratched his face. His left cheek had been bitten by a mosquito, and the wound had been scratched until it was bleeding. "But my friend told me he lives here." Chingu tried to get some information from the man. "Furthermore, you said you don't know Men Nan, so how can you be sure he doesn't live here?" "Someone died in room 303 before, and ever since then, the room has been vacant." The man moved his fingers before his face to look at the blood left underneath his nails. "Stop knocking on the door, it's bad luck. You hear me?" The middle-aged man then slammed the door in his face. However, Chingu realized the man did not return the volume of the television back to normal. The man was probably hiding behind the door to listen to his movements. Chingu did not knock on the door anymore, but he had acquired an important clue from the man. Someone had died in room 303, and ever since that unfortunate incident, the room had remained vacant. He had found the mission venue, so the key now was how to gain entry before midnight. The black phone hasn't made any mistakes yet, so Men Nan's illness is probably related to this room. Chingu looked at his watch. It was already 8 p.m., so he called Dr. Gao. The good doctor had been afraid that Chingu was not able to find his way, so he had been waiting outside the residential area to meet him. After explaining the situation on the phone, several minutes later, Dr. Gao entered the corridor with Men Nan behind him. When he saw Men Nan again, Chingu had a shock. The young man now looked completely different from a normal person. He looked like a naturally deformed person. His head was practically perpendicular to his spine. It looked as if someone was pressing down hard on his head. Chingu pointed at the door and tossed Dr. Gao a confused look. Dr. Gao understood what he meant and shook his head slightly. His condition worsened. The medication helped stabilize his situation for now. "Let us go in first." Men Nan took out the key from his pocket, his head still lowered. The light in the corridor was dim. He tried multiple times, but he failed to get the key into the keyhole. His hands shook angrily, and it felt like he was going to act up again. Seeing this, Chingu immediately went over to help him open the door to room 304. When the three of them entered the room, Dr. Gao and Men Nan probably had gotten used to it, but Chingu frowned as a curious smell overwhelmed him. "It seems to seep out from the walls." Chingu looked around the room. The place was clean and neat. There was no rubbish in the waste bin, so he did not understand where the smell came from. Another body sealed inside a wall? Chingu denied the thought quickly. The wall at the end of the third-floor corridor at Ping An apartment had purposely been strengthened by Wang Qi. The wall of a normal apartment would not be thick enough to hide a body. Dr. Gao noticed how weird Chingu was asking, so he asked him, "What are you looking for? Do you not smell a very weird odor?" Chingu stopped at the wall between 303 and 304, the smell was the most intense there. "There is, but old buildings tend to have weird smell." Dr. Gao led Men Nan to the bed, but the young man refused to go near it. He would rather stand than sit on the bed. Chingu glanced at Men Nan, and he whispered to the doctor, "What's going on with him? He's afraid of falling asleep." In the previous dream, the man was already strangling his neck. If he falls asleep again, he's afraid it might be his eternal slumber. Men Nan refused to sleep and stood stubbornly in the middle of the room. He maintained that weird posture of someone trying to push his head off from his neck. "I keep feeling there's something pressing on top of his head." Afraid of rattling Men Nan, Chingu kept his voice lowered. Not a psychological threat but something that exists in reality. Dr. Gao waved his hand surreptitiously as he stayed beside Men Nan. He pulled out his phone and messaged someone with it. Since Dr. Gao did not reply him, Chenggu wandered off to inspect the other rooms in the small apartment. The place was just over 30 square meters, but it had everything: a bedroom, living room, and a stand-alone bathroom. It does look like a normal rental apartment. Chenggu looked around and found no hidden corner. There was no place to hide a body. He exited the living room and pushed the wooden door that led to the toilet. To his surprise, there was a half-body mirror hanging on the wall directly opposite from the door. The door is right opposite the mirror. Due to the first nightmare mission, Chenggu was very sensitive to the presence of mirrors. He walked slowly to the mirror and looked at his reflection. It's rare for a room layout to have the mirror directly across from the door. Doesn't it feel weird? The mirror was clean, like it was cleaned often. There was barely a stain. He moved his gaze away. There was a sink underneath the mirror. This was the scene for Men Nan's nightmare. Chenggu mirrored the pose mentioned by Men Nan. He bent his body 95 degrees forward, and his head could barely reach the faucet. From this angle, I can look at the situation inside the living room, so the scenario in his dream is entirely possible. If when his head was under the faucet and he could not see into the living room or his gaze was blocked by something, Chenggu would not have been so afraid. It would have proved that it was all just a dream. However, he tested it out personally and realized that the things described in his dream could very well have happened in real life. With his head under the faucet, the world appeared upside down. Men Nan said that in his dream, the man would get closer to him every time. This is weird. Why wouldn't the person just harm him directly? He purposely chose this slow torment. Is there some kind of history between them? Chenggu was thinking about this when he felt something chilly touch the back of his neck. He stood up immediately to touch the spot. A water drop? Where did it come up? Chenggu raised his head to look at the ceiling. It was not leaking. The water came from nowhere. Could it be the mirror? An image of himself inside the mirror coming out to strangle him while he was washing his hair appeared in his mind. The black phone says that this trial mission is called a Room of Three. The mission name itself is a big hint. Chenggu looked at himself inside the mirror, and something cropped up in his mind. There are 3 people inside this room. One is Men Nan, the man in his dream is another, but who is the third person? Could this person be hiding inside the mirror? Placing both his hands on the sink, Chenggu looked around and discovered 2 empty bottles of hair shampoo inside the bathroom waste bin. Men Nan hasn't been living here for long, and he already finished 2 bottles of shampoo. If he is only washing his hair in his sleep, why would the shampoo in real life be exhausted? The child has a habit of sleepwalking. Does he wash his head in the middle of the night? Chenggu thought about it and discounted the idea. Dr. Gao had said that he once invited Men Nan to his own home and the young man's nightmares did not stop. Temporarily ignoring the possibility of sleepwalking, if Men Nan consciously washed his hair until he depleted 2 bottles of shampoo, that is even weirder. Why did he waste so much shampoo washing his hair? The cleanest normal person might wash their hair twice a day, but Men Nan had finished 2 bottles of shampoo in a short amount of time. Chenggu then realized that a third bottle that sat on the sink was half finished already. Under what condition would someone wash their hair with such diligence? Dandruff? Skin disease? Or there is something they need to wash away? Chenggu leaned against the wall to think. There are 2 times Men Nan got into an argument at school. Once was because of the animal prints on the curtain, and another was due to the number of sesame seeds on the biscuit, so it sounds like he suffers from serious OCD. For someone with OCD, if they noticed something not right, they would try their best to fix it. If the mistake could not be fixed, they would be very uncomfortable. Chenggu suspected the reason behind the obsessive hair washing was related to this. Only Men Nan can answer this question. He probably has hidden something important from Dr. Gao. Suddenly Chen Ji's phone vibrated. He took it out and was surprised to find a message from Dr. Gao. Men Nan's family situation is more complicated than I thought. When I told Men Nan's family about his situation, they accepted it a bit too easily. They said they will send enough money to Men Nan for his medical fees, but none of them plan on coming to Zhejiang to visit him. I did not tell you this in case Men Nan heard me, so I sent it to you on the phone. Their son is sick, and the parents didn't even want to come to see him. I also didn't expect that. When I interviewed Men Nan's friends, they all told me they thought Men Nan came from a happy family. I've gone through his social media, and he has shared many posts about loving his family. Men Nan put up a front that felt like he lived in a warm, charming family and was an educated, happy, professional, and studious young man, but it was ultimately just a front. After reading the message, Chen Gu revealed his discovery to Dr. Gao. Soon after that, he got a reply from Dr. Gao. There are 4 main types of OCD: checking, ruminations, contamination, and symmetry in ordering. Based on my observation, Men Nan's symptoms don't fit any of these. His obsessive hair washing merely satisfies this need he has. Based on my observation, Men Nan appears to suffer from a different psychological illness called PTSD. For example, victims of an earthquake remain in a highly alert state even after the quake is long over. They have a hard time walking out from the trauma because the mind keeps sending them the wrong information, telling them quake will return at any moment. Men Nan's symptoms are similar to PTSD. He is in a constant state of alert, and his eyes keep darting about, a sign for lack of security. It is like he is watching out for potential danger. In that case, the hair washing is probably a kind self-protective mechanism. Chen Gu could not understand Dr. Gao's message. How could washing one's hair be related to a self-defense mechanism? PTSD presupposes an earlier trauma. Men Nan repeatedly washing his hair is probably to escape from a psychological trauma. This perhaps has to do with his past. His past? Yes, something he has experienced in the past has left a great trauma in him. Whenever he is reminded of it, his body reacts. To ease the pain, he instinctively seeks out a method to make himself feel better. Based on my observation, that method is to wash his hair. After a while, Dr. Gao sent another message. At the beginning of the semester, I once asked Men Nan why he chose to study psychology. He told me that he wished to cure someone's illness, and I now realize that he was probably talking about himself. Looks like the problem resides in what happened to Men Nan when he was young. In that case, we have to ask him for more details. Only by knowing his history can we help him. If my diagnosis is correct, it is all the more reason that we cannot ask him. He has been trying to forget this past, so if we ask him about it, it might send him over the deep end. Then perhaps we can contact his family. The man is in such pain, but his parents do not care one bit about him. That doesn't seem right. Chen Gu wanted to snap a picture of Men Nan in his current state and send it to Men Nan's parents. I asked them about this when I made the call earlier. Men Nan has had this habit of obsessively washing his hair since he was young. His parents have gotten used to it and don't think it's anything to worry about. Did they say why this happened? No, when Men Nan was small, his parents did take him to visit a psychiatrist. The diagnosis then was OCD, something that was very rare for a child his age. Since he was still so young, there was no medication that could be prescribed. The psychiatrist merely advised his parents give him constant company. Obviously, his parents did not take the doctor's advice, Chen Gu replied without second thought. If Men Nan's parents cared about him, they would not have acted so coldly. A slight OCD is not a disturbance to daily life, so his parents did not take it to heart. Other than that, after some digging around, I found out that Men Nan's biological mother died when he was 5 or 6. His father remarried, and he gave Men Nan a younger brother from the second marriage. Biological mother is dead. There's such a history. Chen-gu saw a ray of light in their investigation. His biological parents did not share a good relationship. His father was not home a lot, so his mother practically raised him alone. One day, a burglar entered the house. What happened next, Men Nan's current parents are not sure. All they knew was the neighbor called the police the next day. The next day, Chen Ji's heart skipped a beat. Then, where was Men Nan during the time of the crime? I'm not sure, but based on the testimony from the neighbor, when the police arrived, Men Nan was already at the crime scene. He was the first person to find his mother. Reading the message from Dr. Gao, a chill ran up Chen Ji's spine. Meaning Men Nan spent the night with his dead mother inside the house. He was only discovered the next morning. I suppose one can see it that way. Perhaps the burglar took pity on Men Nan or was not awake during the time of crime. In any case, Men Nan survived the break-in. However, the sight of his dead mother must have left a deep psychological scar in his heart. I suspect his OCD and PTSD are both related to this murder, but what I don't understand is why he insists on washing his hair. How is that related to the murder? Dr. Gao's reply was filled with confusion. It was the same question Chen-gu wanted to ask as well. He stood before the mirror and looked at his reflection, washing hair. Self-defense mechanism. The image of himself mimicking Men Nan appeared in his mind. Chen-gu touched the back of his neck, and he was suddenly reminded of something. The water drop. He immediately messaged Dr. Gao. At the crime scene, where was the body of Men Nan's mother discovered? After the burglar killed her, he removed the damp-proof boards from the ceiling of the bathroom and shoved her up there. If not for the fact that the neighbor's kid went to school together with Men Nan, and thus both families shared a good relationship, the crime would not have been discovered so soon. The space above the bathroom? Chen-gu raised his head to look at the bathroom he was in. The ceiling of the place was low, he felt pressured standing in it. I think I understand why Men Nan has the hair washing OCD. He used his phone to reply to Dr. Gao. Is it possible that this was the real event that happened? After the burglar broke into the house, both mother and son discovered him. His mother asked for Men Nan to hide while she went to call the police but was unfortunately discovered by the burglar. That's possible, but what does that have to do with hair washing? Men Nan witnessed his mother's murder and hid away. After the burglar left, he went to search for his mother. When he entered the bathroom, his mother's blood happened to drip on his head. When Chen-gu typed those words, he was not feeling so good. Therefore, even now, whenever a liquid falls on his head or whenever he is reminded of that incident, he washes his hair again and again. He wants to wash the memory away. Dr. Gao, you were right, this is more than a simple OCD. After sending those words, Chen-gu looked out the bathroom. Dr. Gao's expression was written in shock. He caught Chen Ji's eyes, and they shared a look. The cause of the illness has been found. Dr. Gao put away his phone and walked toward Chen-gu. I'll bring him away now and provide the necessary post-traumatic treatment. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Chen-gu glanced at Men Nan, who stood where he was, and slightly shook his head. Men Nan kept repeating the same action in his dream, but washing his head wasn't scary. The real scary thing was the man who kept approaching him. To help Men Nan, we have to find out everything about this man and chase him out of Men Nan's dream. Chase the thing out of his dream? Dr. Gao looked at Chen-gu with a suspicious look before turning to look at Men Nan, who stood in a funny posture. In that short moment, he felt he was back at the mental hospital. Are you kidding with me? I already have a theory in mind, it'll be confirmed later tonight. Chen-gu lined all the clues together, and he was 60% confident. There are indeed 3 people in this room. 2 of them have been confirmed. We only need to solve the mystery of the third one. What are you talking about? Dr. Gao was made even more confused by what Chen-gu said. He could not follow the man's train of thought anymore. Of course, this was not Dr. Gao's fault. only Chingu himself knew about the hint provided by the black phone. The most crucial hint was the name of the mission, a room of 3. Chingu would not reveal the black phone to anyone, so he did not explain himself to Dr. Gao but walked out of the room alone. Men Nan kept experiencing the same dream, and the thing that he remembered most clearly was washing his hair. The dream itself could not be counted as a nightmare. Even Men Nan had said at the park that when he experienced this dream for the first time, he did not feel fear. It was after the man had gotten close to him that he started to feel fear. So, in that case, the real threat to Men Nan was the man. Men Nan's description of the dream confirmed this. When he was washing his hair, he did not feel any threat, but when the man neared him, he felt hostility. In the last dream, the man had wandered to his side and strangled his neck. Obviously, the man meant him harm. Therefore, in the room of 3, there was Men Nan the victim, and of the remaining 2, one wanted to protect him, and the other wanted to harm him. In traditional Chinese beliefs, washing one's hair in a dream meant removing bad luck, so Men Nan's dream could very well be warning him that danger was encroaching. After uncovering Men Nan's past, Chingu suspected that the person who wanted to protect Men Nan was his mother. They had only had each other when Men Nan was growing up, so his mother had no reason to harm him. On the other hand, the person who wanted to harm him should have been the ex-tenant in room 303. When Chingu arrived at Hai Ming Apartments for the first time, he had immediately noticed the red strings on the railings. They were knotted in a special way. It was a traditional method of warding off evil spirits. From that moment onward, Chingu had suspected there was a malicious presence in this apartment. That combined with what the uncle from room 301 had told him before entering Men Nan's room, as well the mission hint from the black phone, confirmed his suspicion. To know the identity of the man from Men Nan's dream as well as to solve Men Nan's problem, I have to enter room 303. Furthermore, this is related to the black phone's mission. Harming people in their dream, the thing in room 303 was definitely not a kind spirit. It was probably similar to the mirror monster Chingu had come across earlier. Have to face those monsters again. People were separated into good and evil. It was similar for the departed. Chingu would not hesitate to destroy these evil spirits. The uncle from room 301 said that someone died in room 303 before, and it has stayed vacant since. This means that what remains in the room is probably the dead tenant's malicious specter. Chingu had seen several types of ghosts already. The weakest of them was the lingering spirits. They were not that powerful, just a lingering consciousness. Stronger than lingering spirits were the spirits like Xiao Xiao, and stronger than that was the mirror monster. Chingu believed that the thing inside the apartment should be as powerful as the mirror monster. I wasn't afraid then, so why should I be afraid now? Furthermore, there are so many living people around me who can help at a moment's notice. Chingu walked toward Men Nan to ask about the location of the landlord. Then, he left room 304. He returned to the first floor to knock on room 101. After a while, a fat woman in her 50s opened the door. She studied Chingu up and down before asking, "You want to rent a room?" "Yes, my friend is living in room 304, so I want to rent the room next to him, room 303. 303 is not for rent, find another room." "The room is empty, why isn't it for rent?" Chingu asked. "There are empty rooms on the 4th floor. If you refuse to take those, then leave." The woman then closed the door, effectively ending the conversation. Is she naturally that unsociable, or have I touched upon a sensitive subject? Either way, room 303 sure has its secrets. The landlady naturally would not share the history of the dead person inside room 303, so Chingu swapped his target and returned to the 3rd floor to knock on room 301. The television volume lowered, and the man that stank of alcohol came to answer the door. "You again? Boss, can I have a little bit of your time?" Chingu handed him a 100 note from his pocket. The man accepted the money, and his eyes that fell on Chingu seemed friendly. "What do you want?" I want to know about the things that happened in room 303. The more detailed, the better. Room 303, you say? The middle-aged man did not exit the door but waved at Chin-gu to ask him to enter his room. The small apartment was filled with trash, and Chin-gu could barely find a place to stand. After closing the door, the man turned the television volume up before saying, "You sure are an inquisitive fella, but listen to me, for the sake of yourself and your friend, move out of this place as soon as you can. Not everyone can stay here." "What do you mean?" "There's criteria to the tenants. Interestingly enough, it's related to room 303. The man grabbed a random bottle off the table and took a slurp of beer. "Do you know what the name of the original tenant that stayed in that room was?" "How would I know something like that?" Chin-gu tried his best to ignore the alcoholic breath that drifted out of the man's mouth. It was difficult to tell whether the man was serious or merely making up a story. "The man's name was Wang Hyaming, this is his apartment building. But I saw the landlady earlier. She appeared to be a woman in her 50s. That's his ex-wife." The man glared at Chin-gu, telling him to not interrupt him. Wang Hyaming was fortunate enough to land on a pot of gold. After that, he abandoned his wife to marry a woman from a mysterious background. A few years later, that woman left Wang Hyaming with all his money and even registered him at a mental hospital. In the end, it was his ex-wife who pitted Wang Hyaming and got him out of the hospital. She then arranged a room for him to stay in. That room was room 303. Wang Hyaming was once in a mental hospital. Chin-gu was reminded of the Black Phone's mission hint he came from the third sick hall. Yes, regardless of whether or not the man was crazy before he entered the place, after he came out from it, he was definitely abnormal. Abnormal? What do you mean? I'll give you a simple example. The man pointed at his head. Wang Hyaming had the tendency to knock his head against the wall whenever midnight arrived. It was as if there was something that had drilled itself inside his brain, and he wanted to crack it open. He would scream and wail as well as have arguments with himself. Sometimes, he would not stop even when his head was already bleeding. No one was able to stop him. Occasionally, they even had to call the cops to apprehend the guy. Use his head to hit the wall. Like something had drilled into his brain. Chin-gu thought about what the man had said and realized that Wang Hyaming's condition was rather similar to Zhang Peng's. They were both possessed by something, but Zhang Peng had chosen to cooperate while Wang Hyaming had decided to struggle. Midnight was the time of the day when the yin energy was most concentrated and thus the time when those things were at their most active. It explained why Wang Hyaming acted up every day near midnight. Chin-gu decided to continue this line of questioning. "Boss, other than the nightly madness, did Wang Hyaming perform any other weird actions?" "When he first came out of the mental hospital, he felt normal, a little reticent if anything. However, after prolonged interaction, we discovered how weird he really was. He seemed fine in the day and sometimes would even greet others, but he changed into a different man as night fell. Banging his head against the wall, talking to mirror in the walls, strangling his own neck until his face was purple, but he still would not let go." Through the man's description, Chin-gu discovered a thing or two about Wang Hyaming's past. Wang Hyaming's second wife cheated him out of all his money and sent him to a mental hospital. If this was a setup, then Wang Hyaming had probably been totally normal before he entered the hospital. A normal person entered the hospital and came out not normal. He probably brought the thing back from the hospital. An answer slowly settled in Chin-ji's heart, and he asked another question, "Do you mind giving me the details of Wang Hyaming's death?" The man raised the bottle in his arm to take a big gulp. "I don't know why you're so interested in a dead man, but listen to me, get out while you still can, the place is cursed." "Thank you, but I know what I'm doing." After more persuasion from Chin-gu, the man finally loosened his lips. Before this, whenever Wang Hyaming acted up, we could hear his screaming, and the tenants would go over to help or call the place. However, on the day of his death, none of us heard him. The next morning, when the landlady went to drop him food, his body had already gone cold. What did the scene of his death look like? Chen-gu asked. This was crucial if he wanted to reconstruct what happened to Wang Haiming. The man gave Chen-gu a curious look. He could not understand why this young man was so interested in these things. At the time, I was also there. There was a large hole on Wang Haiming's forehead, and blood was splattered all over the wall between 303 and 304. His face was purple like he had died from asphyxiation. There were fingerprints around his neck, but according to the police, they came from Wang Haiming himself. So, he strangled himself to death. The room was locked, and he was alone. The door and windows weren't tampered with, so that seemed like the logical conclusion. The man finished the beer and tossed the empty bottle away. You done? Since the sun is still up, I want to go down to buy some beer. Since the sun is still up. Chen-gu glanced at the darkening sky and finished the conversation. One last question, after Wang Haiming's death, have there been any weird happenings around here? Chen-gu noticed the man's face shift when he asked that question. The man glanced at the money in his palm and whispered to Chen-gu, many old tenants swear that they have seen Wang Haiming return. But isn't he dead? Before Chen-gu had finished, the man pushed him out of the room. Hey! Explain yourself. The man had already turned down the corridor. After some hesitation, Chen-gu walked toward the first floor, the landlady's room. Since Wang Haiming had probably come from the third sick hall, this meant that he had probably carried some information on the third sick hall on him. Chen-gu would not give up on that trail. After all, the third sick hall was the clue left behind by his parents. After the landlady knew of Chen Ji's intention, her reaction was surprisingly intense. She warned Chen-gu that if he did not get off her premises soon, she would call the cops. The steel door slammed in his face, and Chen-gu was feeling rather helpless, standing in the corridor. The landlady refused to cooperate no matter what Chen-gu said. If I use my mallet to break down the lock of room 303, that landlady will probably call the police. Chen-gu returned to the third floor to discuss this with Dr. Gao, but he stopped when he reached the door. Why is the person in room 302 still on the phone? A young man's voice drifted out from behind the door, and the most repeated sentence was, "Are you trying to push me to my death?" It has been more than half an hour since I left Men Nan's room, and the young man still hasn't finished his phone call. It was normal for a phone call to extend for longer periods of time, but it was weird for him to repeat the same few sentences with similar meanings again and again. Who is he arguing with? His voice is the only one I hear, and now that I listen closer, it doesn't sound like he's talking on the phone at all. Chen-gu leaned against the door to listen in. He was reminded of what the middle-aged man had said when Wang Haiming acted up, he would argue with himself. This person is suspicious. He knocked on the door, and the sound of arguing stopped immediately. 10 seconds later, the door opened a sliver, and a young man's voice came out from behind the door. How can I help you? Regarding this room 303 next to you. Don't know. Before Chen-gu finished, the door already closed. He had asked everyone he could, and Chen-gu was running out of options. He returned to room 304 and nodded at Dr. Gao before walking over to the door to lean against it. The mission venue given by the black phone is room 303. I'll need to enter it and check it out before midnight. Chen-gu rubbed his eyes before walking to the window and pushing it open. Room 304 and 303 were adjacent to each other, and their windows were about 1 meter apart. I should be able to get over it. Chen-gu pulled over a chair and placed it beside the window to give it a try. The window to room 303 was not locked, so he could pull it open from the outside. Getting over there is no problem, but what about the thing that might be waiting inside it? Climbing over the windows to get back might take too much time. Chen-gu lowered his head. The height of 3 floors was not quite short or tall. However, Different from Ping An apartments, the courtyard of Hai Ming apartments was not a grass field but hardened concrete. Should be fine if I'm careful. Chen Gu opened his backpack and placed Xiao Xiao in his shirt pocket before picking out the flashlight and the mallet. What are you doing? Dr. Gao heard the commotion, so he came out of the bedroom. He saw Chen Ji's weird get-up, and he felt a headache coming. You're just in time. Chen Gu dragged Dr. Gao to the window. We'll keep in contact. You stay in room 304, and I'll go take a look in room 303. Why are you going into room 303? Dr. Gao's gaze swept the mallet in Chen Ji's arm before falling on the doll in his chest. His eyes twitched. The source of Men Nan's problem should reside in room 303. I plan to go take a look before midnight arrives. You plan to go in this get-up? With a doll? If I'm doing this alone, I might hesitate, but with you as backup, I have confidence. Chen Gu called Dr. Gao's number and placed the phone in his shirt pocket. Keep in touch. Dr. Gao nodded reflexively. He held the phone in his hands, and the pressure on his shoulders tightened because now he had to look after the safety of 2 patients. Be careful. Chen Gu climbed out the window. He placed the mallet in his pant pocket and leaned into the wall. With one leg hanging on room 304's window, he used his other leg to kick the window to room 303 open. Dr. Gao, don't end the call. Get help if anything bad happens. Then, Chen Gu leaned out the window and reached his leg toward room 303's windowsill. His center of gravity was still leaning toward room 304. When his leg found purchase, his hands that gripped room 303's window loosened, and he slowly leaned toward the other window. When most of his body leaning toward room 303's window, he angled his body right at the opening, released his left hand, and used his right hand to grab the windowsill. With a pull on his right hand, Chen Gu moved his body toward room 303. Climbing into the neighbor's room to solve the patient's illness? Dr. Gao wanted to stop Chen Gu, but the man had already disappeared into room 304's window. He had been in this field of work for more than a decade already, and this was the first time he had faced something like this during a diagnosis. Chen Gu slowly angled his body downward and slid through the open window. I'm finally in. Room 303 had been left vacant since the incident, so the interior design had been left the same. The room was covered in dust, and there were dirty patches all over the walls. The room was dark, and the floor was uneven. After turning on the flashlight, Chen Gu noticed that there was an old and sullied carpet covering the floor of the room. None of the other apartments, including the landlady's room, are carpeted, but this room is? This anomaly attracted Chen Ji's suspicion. A horrible stench was wafting out from underneath the carpet. Chen Gu gripped the edge of the carpet and tore it back. There was not anything scary underneath it, there were merely some old clothes. All the clothes were for gents and their sizes were about the same, so they probably belonged to the same person. The smell of moldy clothing shouldn't be that pungent. Chen Gu used the mallet to move the clothes away and soon he discovered something creepy. Several dead sparrows were hidden underneath the clothes. The bodies are intact, so they couldn't have died more than a week ago. When Chen Gu mastered the dollmaker's talent, some rudimentary knowledge about dead bodies had also entered his mind. This room hasn't been rented after the incident, but someone has come in within this past week to hide these things under the clothes. The problem had become more troublesome, and this shifted his speculation in a different direction. Wang Haiming died in this room. Unfortunately, I have no clue about the actual location, but that shouldn't matter too much. I shall search the whole room, I'll eventually come up with something. Chen Gu did not find anything else in the living room, so he jumped over the pile of old clothes and entered the bedroom. A metal wire bedroom was leaning against the wall. There were several ancient bookshelves near to the bed, and some books were left on them. The pages were all moldy from the moisture, and they were also releasing a weird smell. Chen Gu examined all the drawers and cupboard. He found nothing and finally walked into the bathroom. The layout of all the rooms in the apartment building were similar. As he opened the bathroom door, the mirror was staring back at him. With only the light from the flashlight, the Chingu in the mirror looked rather different from real life. He did not enter the bathroom but merely leaned in to look from the threshold. There do not seem to be any more clues in this room. The room was small, and Chingu had glanced over all the corner already. Standing in the middle of the living room, Chingu looked at the pile of clothes hidden under the carpet. This is weird. All these clothes have blood stains on them. These few small sparrows would not be enough to soak through so many clothes. With the aid of yin-yang vision, Chen Ji's sight was better than most, and he soon discovered something weird. There's something wrong with the clothes. With the mallet in hand, he slowly examined each item of clothing. Finally, he found a very normal gray jacket that was lying at the bottom of the pile. There was dried blood on the shoulder and the back of the clothes. Wang Hyaming had probably worn this jacket when he cracked his head on the wall. Only via blunt force trauma to the head would the blood splatter have appeared like this. What is this? Chingu shook the jacket and found something jiggling in the pocket. He reached into it and felt cold steel on his touch. He pulled it out and saw it was a rusted key. I've seen the keys to these apartments. They are flat copper keys, and this key is much larger than those. Chingu could not understand why a patient from a mental hospital would possess a key that did not unlock the door to his room. Did he pick it up somewhere outside? But if he did, it doesn't explain why he kept it with him. Chingu temporarily did not understand the use of this key, so he held on to it for now. When he turned to leave, his flashlight hit the open window. The glass of the window reflected the shadow of an individual. The tenant in room 302 was leaning his head out of his window to sneak a peek at what was happening over in room 303. Why would he care that I've entered room 303? Chingu pretended not to notice and focused on replacing the pile of clothes. However, his mind was spinning. Only the tenants in room 302 and room 304 can enter this room without using the front door. Men Nan in room 304 is the victim, so the sparrows were probably left here by the young man in room 302. But why? Has he been possessed by the creature in room 303 as well? Chingu was reminded of the weird actions of the young man. Talking to himself and arguing with the wall, it was so very similar to Wang Hyaming's symptoms. Wang Hyaming was possessed by something inside the mental hospital, and the thing followed him out when he exited the hospital. Both parties were constantly fighting over the control of his body. Wang Hyaming decided to die rather than compromise. The man's weird death and the actions that happened at midnight supported Chen Ji's speculation. After Wang Hyaming's death, the thing he carried out with him from the mental hospital probably stayed back in this room. When his body was carried away, there were plenty of police and spectators, so the monster definitely did not show itself. When night came, room 303 was sealed, and the monster had no chance to go look for a new target. Normally speaking, the monster should have been trapped inside this room, but it seems like some contract has been formed between the monster and the young man in room 302 through an unknown method. Having learned the lesson from Wang Hyaming, the monster did not attempt a hostile takeover of the man's body. Both parties are in a symbiotic relationship. Chingu looked at the sparrows on the floor. The blood has soaked through most of the fabric, something that is not possible with just these sparrows. The contract was probably made a long time ago. He was reminded of the words he heard the young man say. He once yelled, "You guys need to stop forcing me," and the sentence could reveal a lot of information. First, he was forced to do something against his will. Judging from the situation in room 303, the monster had probably forced him to bring it a living sacrifice. A few sparrows would not be able to satisfy the monster, so its demand would increase to like stray cats, stray dogs, or even human. The second point was the young man's verbiage. During the argument, he used the term, "you guys," plural, so he was probably facing more than one monster. This confused Chingu, just what kind of creature had Wang Haiming led out of the mental hospital? After replacing everything, Chen-gu walked toward the window. Due to the issue of the angle, the young man from room 302 did not know that he had been found out. He saw Chen Ji's shadow walk toward the window, and he quickly retreated into his room. One more individual to look out for tonight. Chen-gu climbed out of the window, and his hands gripped the windowsill. As he was about to turn, the corner of his eyes swept the bathroom of room 303. Behind the half-open door stood a long shadow with two different faces. "Who's there?" Chen Ji's hands almost slipped. When he focused his eyes, the thing had disappeared. There was nothing in the bathroom, but a shadow seemed to flash across the mirror. Hanging off the window, it was quite dangerous without safety devices. Chen-gu did not stay and quickly moved back into room 304. "Did you find anything?" Dr. Gao asked out of politeness. "Look at this." Chen-gu retrieved the key from his pocket. "Dr. Gao, are there any locks at your hospital that require a key like this?" Dr. Gao accepted the key from Chen-gu and turned it in his hand. The key was slightly larger than a normal key. "It doesn't look like the key to the office or the surgery room." "I'm not so sure." Chen-gu put the key away since he could not get an answer from Dr. Gao. He would give it a try when he was ready to enter the third sick hall. "That's all you discovered?" "A key?" Dr. Gao ended the call. He had not known what to expect when Chen-gu climbed out the window, but he definitely had not expected him to return with a key. "Don't underestimate this key, it might be the key to what is happening." Chen-gu glanced into the bedroom. "Has Men Nan fallen asleep?" "I don't suggest for him to sleep in room 304, he's afraid of this environment. After he falls asleep here, his mind might give him additional pressure, thus increasing the possibility of a nightmare." Dr. Gao was worried about Men Nan. "Since we have confirmed his illness was due to childhood trauma, we should focus on that and provide the necessary counseling. Things are not as simple as you think," Chen-gu explained to Dr. Gao patiently. The doctor had not been exposed to the other world, so his way of thinking was restricted. If Men Nan is suffering mainly because of his childhood trauma, then why did his illness surface only after he moved into this apartment? Dr. Gao had no answer to that question. The childhood trauma is part of the manifestation of the problem that lies in this apartment. Something here has seriously triggered him, causing him to fall ill, that is the real source. Chen-gu tried his best to explain the situation without referencing the other world too much. Dr. Gao nodded. Even though he still had reservations with regards to Chen Ji's methods, but it was undeniable that the man had cured Wang Xian. Standing from a scientist's standpoint, he wanted to know more about Chen Ji's various ideas and methods, but from the doctor's standpoint, he merely wished for his patients to be cured. Chen-gu could see the hesitation in Dr. Gao's face, and he knew it would be hard to convince the doctor. "Even if we move him away, the nightmare will still happen, haven't you tried that already? In that case, why not we just let him fall asleep here? The two of us will be by his side, and when he shows any sign of pain, we will wake him up immediately." Psychological therapy was a long and arduous process, and after some consideration, Dr. Gao finally agreed. Following some more discussion, they entered the bedroom, and to their surprise, Men Nan was already on the bed. The young man was exhausted, with his chin on the pillow, he had fallen asleep leaning against the bed. After getting Men Nan into the bed, Chen-gu wanted to examine Men Nan's forehead and neck but was stopped by Dr. Gao. "Let him sleep." "Okay." Chen-gu pulled 2 chairs over. "We'll do this in rounds. One will stay up until midnight, and the other will take over. Whenever there's something wrong, we'll wake him up immediately. You should go and rest for now. Leave this to me." Dr. Gao had Chen-gu sleep on the living room sofa while he stayed in the bedroom to look after Men Nan. Before he arrived, Chen-gu had spent the whole morning working inside the haunted house and the afternoon making the mannequin heads, so he was tired. He switched his phone to vibrate mode and set the alarm for midnight. Lying on the sofa, with Xiao Xiao beside him, he soon fell asleep. In his dream, he felt a vibration coming from his palm. Chenggu sat up on the sofa. He looked at the phone. It was midnight. He entered the bedroom and saw the deep frown on Dr. Gao's face. Before he said anything, Dr. Gao made a shush motion at him. The two stood beside the bed quietly. After about 5 minutes, Men Nan, who was sleeping in bed, suddenly straightened his arms underneath his body. It seemed like he was trying to sit up. He failed after a few attempts, and the arms flapped weakly beside him like everything that happened earlier was just a dream. Sleepwalking? Chenggu whispered to Dr. Gao. The latter shook his head and pointed at Men Nan's eyes. Chenggu followed Dr. Gao's finger and realized that Men Nan's eyes were open, but only a quarter of his pupils could be seen. The rest was all white. Men Nan honestly looked quite scary, like he was possessed. After about 10 minutes, his arms reached forward once more to try to push himself up. After several failures, Men Nan finally managed to sit up. His eyes were fully white, and Men Nan sat on the bed, his head slightly lowered. Dr. Gao, has he woken up? Chenggu and Dr. Gao were standing about 1 meter away from Men Nan, but the young man did not seem to notice them as his eyes stared forward. His pupils were rolled back to his head, so they could only see white of his eyes. Probably not. Dr. Gao signaled for Chenggu to take a step back. Both of them leaned against the wall to avoid running into Men Nan. Then, is this sleepwalking? This was the first time Chenggu had seen something so weird as well. Sleepwalking is a type of common sleep impediment, but if it was just pure sleepwalking, his pupils would not have rolled back so far. The two communicated softly. Men Nan sat on the bed for a while, and without warning, he slowly stood up. Should we wake him? Their original plan had been to wake Men Nan when he did anything weird, and this was already past the definition of something weird. No, if we wake him now, we might break his already fragile mind. Dr. Gao paused before adding, I've been watching Men Nan's face and following the changes to his expression. Even if we are forced to wake him, we should wait until there's a drastic change in his emotions. The two exited the bedroom and stood outside for observation. Men Nan stood beside his bed for a few minutes before slowly turning to face the living room. His head was still lowered, and his eyes were open, but they were mostly white. In such a condition, he moved his legs to walk out of the bedroom. Chenggu nudged Dr. Gao lightly. What is he doing now? I've treated a child who sleepwalked before. He suffered from slight OCD, and every night he fell asleep, he would spend more than half an hour fixing the mattress to make sure the 4 edges lined up perfectly. After he fell asleep, he would sleepwalk in the middle of the night to again fix the edges before going back to sleep. Dr. Gao looked at Men Nan, and his face was full of worry. That kind of sleepwalking that eventually returned to bed is not so bad. We're most afraid of sleepwalkers who attempt things that are unexpected. After Men Nan exited the bedroom, he did not stop or hesitate and head for the bathroom directly. The wooden door was pushed open, and without turning, he walked toward the mirror. The faucet was turned on, and the bathroom was soon filled with the sound of rushing water. Is he planning to wash his hair? Chenggu looked at Dr. Gao, who looked back at him with equal shock. Don't look at me, this is the first time I've seen this as well. The sound of water intensified, and Chenggu as well as Dr. Gao rushed to the bathroom. Men Nan, who stood before the sink, was slowly bending down. His head lowered, and they both caught a glimpse of Men Nan's upside-down face. Even then, his pupils were nowhere to be seen. His head touched the water and Men Nan's expression finally changed. His face twitched slightly like he had seen something incredibly scary. Chenggu quivered under his gaze. He turned back to look, but there was nothing inside the room. Has he spotted something in his dream? Reality and the dream are connected? Men Nan had once mentioned the man entered the room from outside and stood beside him. His hair was wet, and Men Nan masterfully grabbed the hair shampoo and squirted a generous amount on his head. He scrubbed his scalp mechanically, but his eyes were fixed in a certain direction. The shampoo slid down his hair, and he instinctively wanted to close his eyes when the shampoo reached his eyes. At that moment, various negative emotions like fear and panic all surfaced at once. Quick! Wake him up! The moment Dr. Gao shouted this command, Men Nan reached out to strangle himself. The veins on his arms popped as he tried to snap his own neck. His body lost balance, and he collapsed to the floor, the shampoo and water splashing everywhere. Wake up! Men Nan! Dr. Gao and Chingu both tried to pry his arms away, but no matter how loud they yelled, the young man did not respond. He continued to strangle himself and tried to use his head to knock against the sink. Detain him! Dr. Gao had probably faced similar patients before. He expertly asked Chingu to hold Men Nan's upper body while he whipped out his belt to tie Men Nan's wrists together. Men Nan, this is Dr. Gao. After his hands were tied, Dr. Gao held Men Nan's head with his palm on his forehead to stop the young man from knocking his head into the wall. It's all right now, it's all right now. Dr. Gao's voice was gentle and kind, it had a trustworthy quality to it, but it did not seem to be at all effective on Men Nan. The young man's condition did not improve but only got worse. He opened his jaws to bite at the people around him, and when that failed, he bit on his tongue and soon blood seeped out of his lips. Get me the towel. Before Dr. Gao shouted that command, Chingu had already stuck the towel into Men Nan's mouth. By then, Men Nan should have woken up already, but he had not. His pupils kept moving upward, and Chingu was suddenly reminded of something. He had seen the young man do the same thing before at the park. He's looking upwards. The thing is on his head. Chingu tried to grab above Men Nan's hair, but there was nothing there. Let's get him onto the bed first. Dr. Gao also did not know what had happened in Men Nan's dream. Both he and Chingu cooperated to haul Men Nan off the floor. His hands were bound, and a towel was stuck in his mouth, but Men Nan still tried his best to hurt himself. His head wiggled about violently. Chingu was afraid that he might knock into the mirror, so he walked forward to steady his head, but when he raised his head to look into the mirror, something shocking was reflecting in it. Chin Ji's pupils narrowed, and a man was lying on Men Nan's back in the mirror. The man was as thin as twig, but his face was uneven on both sides, like a line was split down the middle and two faces were sewn together to form one. The man was strangling Men Nan's neck and attempting to enter his body, but another force from within Men Nan was stopping the monster, causing it to slow down. Both parties were fighting over Men Nan's body, and that was the main source of his pain. The sight in the mirror was scary, but Dr. Gao could not see it. Now, only Chingu could. Help Men Nan. When I left room 303, I saw a shadow escaping into the mirror. This monster is probably of the same type as the mirror monster that I've dealt with before, so breaking the mirror should be able to hurt it somewhat. Chingu did not discuss this with Dr. Gao. He took out his mallet and swung it at the mirror. The mirror pieces shot everywhere, and the sound shattered the night silence. The whole building had probably heard that. As the mirror crumbled, Men Nan, who was trapped in the nightmare, finally showed signs of waking up. He screamed, and his pupils slowly returned to normal. At the same time, a shadow glided across the floor as if it was trying to escape. Chingu pushed Men Nan toward Dr. Gao, and he jumped up holding the mallet. By the time he exited the bathroom, the shadow had already reached the front door. Chingu picked up Xiao Xiao, who had gotten a little misshapen from being his sleep buddy, and threw her at the shadow. The ragdoll stained with fake blood arced through the air before knocking into the shadow. Weirdly enough, when the formless shadow was hit, it stopped at the door, the doll biting on its arm. Well done. Chingu aimed his flashlight at the shadow. Under the bright light, the shadow started to twist, and its color dimmed. Without the refuge of the mirror, the monster was weaker than Chingu had expected. It abandoned part of its body and escaped into room 302. The parts that the monster abandoned soon disappeared. It was unclear whether it had dissolved into thin air or been eaten by Xiao Xiao. Eating these things appears to be beneficial to Xiao Xiao. Chengu placed Xiao Xiao into his pocket and used the mallet to bang on room 302's door lock. "Come out." The old steel door shook, shedding dust and rust, even the frame itself was shaking. The commotion was so loud that all the nearby tenants were alerted. The door to room 301 opened a sliver. "What is all this commotion about?" The middle-aged man roared with the beer bottle in his hand, but he did not step out completely from his room. The door to room 302 was suddenly pulled open from within, and the young man living in it held a cleaver in his hand and slashed at Chengu madly. The mirror monster has entered his body. The corridor was narrow, so there was only so much room for Chengu to maneuver. Chengu took a step back and realized that the door to the middle-aged man's room was open. He fell into it and slammed the door shut. The sound of a cleaver chopping on the door was eerie. The young man had completely lost his sanity, his eyes were filled with streaks of blood. His face was in a mad grimace, and he said no words, like all his energy was being channeled into cleaving the door of room 301. It felt like he was planning to chop Chengu into pieces. Then again, it was understandable. It had planned this for weeks, and finally, it had almost gotten into Men Nan's body but was stopped by Chengu at the last minute. On top of that, it had lost parts of its body in the struggle. The corridor was filled with the sound of the cleaver slashing on the steel door. "What's going on?" The middle-aged man inside the room was stunned beyond belief. His calves weakened, and he collapsed onto the shoe racks. "Help me." The room door was not locked, and the young man could have burst through at any moment. "I'll call the police." The middle-aged man did not dare go near the door. He placed the bottle on the table and hurriedly went looking for the phone. In his hurry, he knocked over the empty bottles, and they clattered noisily. "I said come help me with the door." As the sound of the cleaver reverberated through the halls, the rooms lit up one after another, and many tenants leaned their heads out the door. In room 304, after Dr. Gao deposited Men Nan on the living room sofa, he heard Chen Ji's cries for help. He ran out of the room with a stool in his hand. The young man from room 302 had gone berserk, his focus was fully on Chengu. Dr. Gao made use of this opportunity to sneak up on him from behind. When he was 1 meter away from the man, he raised the stool to knock at the upper part of the young man's spine. Dr. Gao's target was probably the head, but for some reason, his aim was off. The young man lost his balance and staggered forward, his body knocking into the door. Gripping the cleaver, his neck twisted unnaturally around, and the young man glared at Dr. Gao with bloodshot eyes. A roar bubbled from his throat. As the young man planned to turn to attack Dr. Gao, Chengu saw this opportunity and kicked the door open. The door slammed into the man, and without giving him the chance to recover, Chengu picked up a bottle from the floor and swung it at the young man's head. The bottle shattered, and blood flowed down the man's head. Chengu charged forward and knocked into the young man, holding him down on the floor. Dr. Gao also ran forward to grab the cleaver away from the young man. The young man tried to resist until the other tenants also came out to help detain him. It was then that he finally gave up on his resistance. With his cheek pressed into the cement floor, the young man's eyes focused on Chengu, like he was trying to memorize Chen Ji's features. 3 minutes later, the young man's pupils rolled backwards, and he fell unconscious. At the same time, the young man's shadow that was reflected on the wall suddenly moved and dashed down the stairs. Many people present saw that, but before they could react, the shadow had disappeared into the night. What was that? Dr. Gao's eyes widened, many strange things had happened that night. I'm not so sure. The vengeful eyes that the young man had shot Chengu before he fainted were very familiar, it reminded him of the haunted house's mirror monster. Could it be that both of them came from the same world inside the mirror? Chinguk climbed up from the floor and was about to give chase when he stopped at the staircase. The landlady blocked the staircase with a stern face. Has this person been taken over by the monster? Chinguk took several steps back. Then again, he was the cause of the problems that had happened that night at her apartment, so he was feeling rather unsettled. What are you guys up to so late at night? The landlady walked up to the third floor, and a few of the elder tenants followed behind her. Just as Chinggu was wondering what to say, the middle-aged man in room 301 ran out with his phone. He had been hiding in his room until then. Sis. It feels like brother-in-law has returned, the man whispered into the landlady's ear. Xiaodu in room 302 used the cleaver and attacked people indiscriminately. It was completely the same as brother-in-law's situation. When he said that, the tenants who had gathered around started to disperse. A few ran back into their rooms and locked the door tight. Wasn't everything going just fine? The landlady looked at the chaos in the third-floor corridor. She had her brother carry the young man to the hospital while she moved to talk to Chinggu and Dr. Gao. We were merely defending ourselves. The kid from room 302 almost killed me. I know. The landlady paused before saying directly, I still need to rent this place. Making this more complicated than it is will not be good for business, so how about we let this be? I will pay the child's medical bills, and we will not get the police involved. The child is still young, and I don't want to ruin his future. Hearing the landlady, Chenggu realized that she knew a thing or two about the secret in room 303 as well as the reason behind room 302's young man's madness. After balancing the pros and cons, Chenggu realized there was no benefit to pressing this further. After all, he had completed the Black Phone's mission. Chenggu discussed this with Dr. Gao, and both of them agreed with the landlady. After the landlady left, Dr. Gao returned to room 304 to look after Men Nan while Chenggu waited in the living room. He still had plenty of questions left for the young man.